right, welcome everyone. My name is Melissa White. I'm the Environmental Justice Coordinator for the New Mexico Environment Department. Welcome to the meeting of the Clean Transportation Fuel Standards Advisory Committee. Welcome committee members online as well as in the room. Welcome members of the public online and in the room. Welcome to our tech folks who are helping us and the NMED staff who are here. Appreciate all of you being here. I want to do a couple of quick housekeeping items. One, on the doors, on both of these doors, you'll find the Wi-Fi information if you need to join the Wi-Fi, and also the code to the bathrooms. They are just outside, like near the entrance of the building, near the security guard station. I wanted to ask everyone during this meeting to please keep background noise to a minimum. If you need to have side conversations, please keep them very quiet so as not to distract everyone else. And I think at this time, I'm going to ask Owen Peterson of NMED to do roll call and let us know if we have a quorum.
Good morning, everyone. I'll now take roll call, and I'll try to get everyone's names right, but I apologize in advance if I mispronounce any. Alaric Babé. Is Alaric Babé here?
I think he's online.
I'm wondering if he's online. And just a reminder to the advisory committee members who are online, you are able to unmute yourself.
Okay, we'll come back to Alaric at the end. Amy Brown.
Good morning, I'm here.
Anthony Willingham. If you're online, if you could take yourself off mute and give me a verbal confirmation, that'd be great. Anthony Willingham. Okay, we'll come back to Anthony as well. Brian Bartlett.
Good morning.
Kara Lynch.
Good morning, I'm present.
Thank you. Corey Ann Wind.
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Dalva Mullenberg.
Dalva emailed me and said you would be late. Okay, come back.
Okay, we'll come back to Dalva. Daniel Klein. Okay, we'll come back to Daniel as well. Eduardo Barrientos.
Present.
Thank you. Ethan Epstein.
Here.
Evan Rosenberg. Okay, we'll come back to Evan. Gabriel Pasiniak.
No.
Hello, good morning, I'm present.
Thank you. Graham Noyes. Jane Sadler. Okay, we'll move on. Jed Smith. Okay, Jessica Gregg. Joseph Serena.
Present.
Thank you. Carrie Buttonhoff.
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you, Carrie. Carl Feldman. Thank you. Lloyd Funk?
Present.
Thank you. Luis Reyes? Matthew Wire?
Good morning. I'm here.
Thank you. Michael Teague?
Here.
Thank you. Robert Hagevort? Sam Wade?
I'm here, thanks.
Thank you. Teresa Sosa?
Good morning. Here.
Thank you, Teresa. Tiffany Wallace Pollock?
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Todd Trauman?
Good morning, I'm here.
Tom Dolmeyer? Travis Madsen?
Good morning, I'm present.
Thank you. Viswanath Krishnamurthy?
Present. Good morning.
Thank you, Ish. Okay, I'm going to just quickly run through the names of folks that didn't confirm. Anthony, Alaric, I think you joined. Alaric Babé?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I am here. Thank you. There is I just put something in the chat. My WebEx automatically logged me into the meeting from last week, and there were about 10 or 15 people also there.
That is good context. Thank you. Okay, we'll work on sorting that out.
Yeah, I think so. If someone just logs in from last week, you can use the same link and maybe just let everyone know.
Yeah, okay, let's take a minute and figure that out. Okay, just bear with us while we direct those other folks into this WebEx meeting.
Sorry for the delay. We're just working out how to help folks who joined the old link to join the new link.
Hi, while we're paused, can I also say that whenever Melissa speaks, it's really difficult to understand, whereas the gentleman who was taking roll was very clear. So I don't know if it's the mic you're using.
How about now? Is this better?
I'm sorry, see, that was an example. I couldn't understand what you said.
Is this better?
Not much.
Okay, I'm going to switch to the mic on the table.
Thank you.
How about this? Is this better?
Yes, that's a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you for letting us know. So while we're working on the access for the other advisory committee members, I'm going to turn the mic over to Claudia Borchert of NMED to give a little welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Amy, how's the sound check? Okay?
Yes, you're very clear, Claudia. Thank you.
All right, great. So welcome to the second meeting of this advisory committee. We want to once again make sure you know just how grateful we are that you are contributing your time and your expertise to the process here. I also just want to mention that some of the other team members, as well as some of the advisory committee members, are in a rulemaking right now before the EIB on air quality fees. And so I think that I know Michelle and Donna are there, as well as maybe Dahl and others. So we appreciate that not everyone can attend here today because of the fact that there are some other important processes going on in parallel. I also just want to make sure that that you're aware that we keep the website for the Clean Fuel Standard, and in particular for the advisory group, up to date to the degree to which we can always. So if you are ever wanting to, for example, see the recording from the last meeting or the notices or the agendas, the search would be NMED Climate Change Bureau, and then the subpage of that is the Clean Fuel Standard, and so that's a place to stay up to date on the content of what is being created here. Also I think you guys all know because you're here, but the place to find the most recent link to join this meeting by WebEx is to go to the NMED calendar, and then this event is listed there as an event for the day in which it happens, and that is where the link is. And obviously we're learning here that it's not always the same as a previous meeting. So that's how, if you ever are not able to be here in person, how to find that link. All right, so today we are focusing on the topics of the mix of fuels that drive New Mexico today and the mix of fuels that we expect to become more prevalent in the advent of a clean transportation fuel program. And so today we have both a series of presenters as well as a series of prompts that we hope to use to solicit robust technical input from you who have a lot to offer in this space. But before we proceed on that process, I want to give you a little bit more detail on what we're planning here for this committee and also for the report, because that came up last time. In particular, the meeting schedule, when we figure out how to comply with the Open Meetings Act, we've determined that we will need to have one more meeting, and we're proposing that on July 19th. So we have the July 12th is our last of the three that are. We need to reconvene this group virtually only on July 19th to discuss and approve the committee. And not only that, we also then need to reconvene the group, perhaps as a second time, only administratively, to approve the minutes of the 19th committee meeting where we discuss and approve the report. So, just complying with the Open Meetings Act comes with all kinds of steps that we think through and then come back to you on what we are proposing as a result of it. Recap, we'll bring the report to you on the 19th. We always publish the agenda 3 days, 72 hours in advance of this meeting. And so with that, the report we plan to have available for you to review on Tuesday morning by 9 a.m. on the 16th of July. So that's 3 days before the convening of the 19th. And also just want to review a little bit more about what the report will contain. The report will contain, we've discussed here, how to change the topics, for example, that we're seeking input for. And if you don't have a chance to actually provide the feedback that you're hoping to in this setting, members of this committee, as well as all members of the public, will have opportunity to provide comments on that report. So the report, hopefully you guys will approve and discuss it and approve it on the 19th. The following Monday, we'll publish it and allow for a 7-day comment period. And so we encourage all of you here to provide additional comments on whether, on the content of the report, an opportunity for you to provide us more information that you feel like will be relevant to the NMED rulemaking team as we develop and finalize the rules. All right, so I think that's enough on the process. I wasn't holding it down all the way. Okay. So we'll be updating you on the process. That's the process as we see it now. And we do want to reiterate that this is a public process and that we also encourage others who are not members of the committee to also submit their comments, because this is all a valuable process, and it's really important that we're transparent about how it all works, which is why we're making this part of the open, following the Open Meetings Act for that. And the entire process, as we think through it, is all about making sure that everyone in the public has access to provide us information to the rulemaking team as we proceed. So we're returning the floor to you, Owen, to take the rest of the roll call, is that right?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to run through the names of folks who I did not get a confirmation from before, starting with Anthony Willingham. Are you there?
I am here, yes.
Thank you, Anthony. Daniel Klein. Evan Rosenberg. Graham Noyes.
Present.
Thank you. Jane Sadler.
Present. Present.
Thank you. Jed Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Jessica Gregg.
Present.
Luis Reyes. Okay. Tom Dolmeyer. Okay, give me 1 second to assess if we have a quorum. Okay. We are missing 5, so I believe we do have a quorum. Back to you, Melissa.
Excellent. Thank you, Owen. And thank you all for your patience. Even with all that, we're only 3 minutes behind. And I think in a little while we might ask the committee if we could extend the meeting a little bit past 12, so I think we'll be okay. What I would like to do now is go through this approval of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to, or have all advisory committee members seen the agenda? Yeah? Okay. So I'm going to suggest or invite if an advisory committee member would like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Travis Madsen. I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Madsen. Is there a second?
Second, Eduardo Barrientos, ExxonMobil.
Thank you, Mr. Barrientos. Did you capture that, Owen?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see. I think we can do it by raising hands, I believe. Is that okay? All advisory committee members in favor of approving the agenda, please raise your hand. And Owen's going to keep your hands up, please, while Owen counts.
Is everyone in the room?
Okay.
Online?
And we'll check online.
If you're online, could you please raise your hand? You keep your hands raised for just 1 second. It takes a while for us to scroll through the entire list.
Oh, the joys of hybrid.
For folks online, if you're having trouble finding out how to raise your hand, there is a little hand at the bottom of the screen next to the smiley face.
Okay, thanks for your patience. It is unanimous. The motion
Awesome.
passes.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so now is the time when I would ask Kelly Villanueva, an attorney with New Mexico Environment Department, to please come up to the presenter. Oh, Chris is here. Are you going to do it, Chris? Okay, Chris Vigil, if you could come up here, please. And Chris will talk to you about the open meetings compliance procedure. Everyone in the room should have found a copy of that in front of your seat. And yeah, he's going to share with you about, or Kelly, are you going to do it? Together. Okay, here they come.
Ma'am, do you have a copy of that you can put up on the chat or something so we can see what you're looking at?
Yeah, I'm sure we can do that. Colt will do that for us.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Vigil, Assistant General Counsel for the New Mexico Environment Department in the Air Quality Bureau. I'm here with Kelly Villanueva, co-counsel, also Assistant General Counsel and in the Air Quality Bureau. So in the last meeting, I spoke about the Open Meetings Act, and the spirit of the act, of course, is to increase transparency and to allow for public participation in public information. So in accordance with the Open Meetings Act and the New Mexico, it's the Department of Justice now, right? Not the Attorney General's office, but the New Mexico Department of Justice guidance. We've developed this open meetings compliance procedure that we're offering to you for your consideration and adoption as part of the sort of formal compliance with the Open Meetings Act. So there are a couple options for you today. One is to take some time now to look at this and take a vote on it and adopt it or reject it or move to amend as you see fit, or to table it for now and review it when you have some more time, and then, again, adopt it, reject it, or amend it. If I can pitch you on it, this is just basically boilerplate stuff, I'm sure, as you all expect. So nothing's going to catch you by surprise. This is all just, formal compliance stuff. So if you choose to adopt it today, you'll be done with that, and then you can sort of just focus on the business at hand. So that's all we have for you this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
This is Travis Madsen. I had a chance to review this document while I was sitting around waiting for the meeting to start. It looks good to me, but I guess I have a question for the members of the committee. Have you all had a moment to look at this yet, or would you like to take some time now to review it? My preference is that we take care of this business now.
I would agree with you as far as taking care of it now. I think we can, I don't know if you need a motion or how we need to go through it, but it seems pretty straightforward.
We do have another question online, I think, from Anthony Willingham.
Oh, apologies. I need to lower my hand.
Okay, thank you. I believe that's all the questions.
Sorry, this is Alaric Babe. I do have a question. Are we able to review this online somehow?
It's been posted in the chat, and I think it's also on the website under this meeting and with the materials for this meeting.
Okay. Can I have 3 minutes to review?
It's two pages, so if you chose to review it now, it really wouldn't take that much time.
Yeah, if I could just read it over for just a couple of minutes, and I should be done very, very shortly. If it's on the webpage, I can find it.
I think taking a couple of minutes to review it now makes sense. So anyone who would like to take a look at the document, you can find it on the Clean Fuel Standard page online. Okay, I move for a 5-minute recess.
Would anyone like to approve that motion?
Ethan Epstein, second.
And all in favor?
Okay, we have 19 votes in favor. The motion passes.
Okay, so we'll take the recess until 9:32. Okay, folks, the recess is over, and Chris Hill and Kelly will pick up where they left off. But actually, I think, should we now, we should check, because some folks have joined, some advisory committee members have joined online since we did a roll call. So Owen is going to do a quick check.
I think I know it's a headache, but if we're going to adhere to Robert's rules, I think we need to reconvene. Yeah, so probably have to have a motion and a second and a vote and all that other stuff.
I move to reconvene the meeting. This is Travis Madsen.
Just second that.
Second.
All in favor of reconvening? That's everyone in the room.
Does anyone not agree to reconvene? So folks online, if you could lower your hands if you were in agreement, and now can you raise your hand if anyone does not agree to reconvene? Robert, do you need more time? Robert Hagavort, I see that you have your hand raised. Motion passes.
We are reconvened.
So it seems to me that maybe it would be a time to discuss and, if appropriate, vote on an adoption, rejection, or amendment of the procedures.
I've reviewed the procedures and I have no suggestions for changes, and I'd welcome a motion to approve.
This is Mike Teague. I move to approve as written.
Alaric Babe, second.
All in favor, please raise your hands online or in person. That's everyone in the room.
We have 24 in favor. Does anyone abstain? It's online once again. If you were in agreement, please put your hands down now. The motion passes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Yeah, I appreciate that. I know it's been a lot of administrative work so far this morning, but we're actually a little ahead of schedule, and we have a lot of presentations and discussions for you. So there is an option here, since you have approved the open meetings compliance procedure. The committee has the option, it's your discretion, whether to include public comment at the next meeting. So I want to just maybe have a discussion first, and then we'll see if someone wants to make a motion. Whether this committee would like to have public comment placed on the agenda for the next meeting. And I want to just give a few reminders. It would be only oral comment, just as you all are giving. And also a reminder that the public can comment in writing on the final report after that is posted, just as you all can. And if you do make a motion, you'll need to decide how much time you want to give for public comment. So let's see first if anyone has questions or comments about that topic.
This is Graham Noyes. Just a comment. We have a very short time together. I think we've got lots of members here who have very good input, and we are very much on the front end of this process. So I think it may be just most efficient in terms of this committee doing its best work not to take oral public comment, given that there's an opportunity for written comment, just offering that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or thoughts about this topic?
This is Travis Madsen. I generally think it's best practice to give the public an opportunity to weigh in. I'm also sympathetic to what Graham just said about our limited time. One question would be, would it be possible to add a public comment session to the virtual meeting that Claudia just mentioned on the 19th?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I'm sure my experts here can tell us. We believe it's possible, yes.
That might be a compromise position, then. I'm interested in allowing public comment on the 19th.
This is Ethan Epson. So I'm on the Spaceport Board, and every meeting there's integrated opportunity for public comment. I think it's inherent in the kind of the inclusive opportunity at the beginning of the presentation here, from offering people the opportunity to kind of comment. So I'm pro comment, and just as a matter of practice, you rarely see that substantial amount of public comment, at least in that setting. I know this is a different one, but I am for public comment.
I'll give a few seconds here to see if there's any other comments to make about this, and then invite a motion if anyone wants to make one.
This is Graham. I just wanted to respond to those comments, given that that's considered to be best practice and is commonly the approach. I would be supportive of it as well. Thank you.
Okay. Would someone on the committee like to make a motion?
This is Travis Madsen. I move to add 45 minutes of public comment to the 19th.
Do we have a second?
Gabe Pastiniak, a second.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Gabriel Pastiniak.
Thank you. All right, all in favor? That is everyone in the room.
Is anyone not in favor? Kara Lynch, you have your hand raised online. Can you confirm whether you are not in favor of the motion?
Apologies, I meant to take that down.
No problem. We have no nays. Does anyone abstain? No abstentions. The motion passes.
Thank you, Owen, and thank you to the committee. So we're about to move into our presentations and substantive discussion section. I'd like to just remind folks that the online chat is only for IT questions. We can't respond to other questions in the chat. If you have an IT question, put it in the chat and someone will help you. And if you have another kind of question, please raise your hand and we'll call on you as soon as we can. I also want to say that, our agenda is pretty packed. We have presentations. We're asking the presenters to speak for 5 to 10 minutes. And then there's a series of prompts for you all to comment and give your thoughts. Each prompt, we're asking you to, the total amount of time will be 5 minutes maximum. And so for each person, just 1 minute to speak. And I know that's a very tight schedule. So we have the option to extend the meeting until 12:30 if the committee approves. This was just really for you to give you more time to talk and more people, more opportunities to talk. So this is the last vote, I believe, I hope. If the What? Oh, I thought we did last time. Do we need to vote to extend the time? Do you know? Okay, so I'm inviting if anyone on the committee would like to make a motion to extend to 12:30.
Joe Serena, I'd like to make a motion to extend till 12:30.
Eduardo Barrientos, second.
Okay, and all in favor? That is everyone in the room?
But as you start, make sure everyone online can hear you.
Okay, we have 25 in favor. The motion passes.
Thank you so much. I also want to say we will have a 10-minute break at around 10:35. I'll let you know when it's going to happen. And now I would like to introduce our first presenter, Michael Ford, who is the one and only economist for the New Mexico Environment Department.
Thank you. And before I begin, just a quick mic check. Can folks hear me right now? Well, specifically, Corianne is raising her hand. Yes. Corianne, do you mind just giving a verbal confirmation that I am audible to you from online?
I can hear you, Michael.
Awesome, Corianne. Thank you so much. You are a hero. Very much appreciated. Excellent. Well, without further ado then, I will get into the slides. And I want to give people a quick alert that I will be using in PowerPoint a high-tech laser pointer. So we are combining the Bob Barker microphone from the 70s with the high-tech laser pointer from the future, and that just goes to show that different technologies are needed to come together to make this policy work. All right. So my presentation will be on fuel used in New Mexico, how to analyze the carbon intensity of those fuels, and what opportunities this discussion will provide for ways to generate clean fuel credits. And that is going to segue into Travis, who will be presenting on the best practices and principles for generating credits under a clean fuel standard, and a number of presenters that follow Travis who will discuss the different fuel options that we have available and the nuances associated with each. All right. Before that, so I'm having, oh, there we go. Just getting used to this new technology. And, you know, that, again, just to extend the analogy, that's probably how things work with the new. I'll stop. All right. So the first question to ask, and this kind of comes from our last meeting, was there was a lot of discussion about what the current panorama is for transportation fuel use in New Mexico. You know, the pointer thing is maybe not panning out like I was hoping, so I'm going to use one of my other options, which is just to do regular transitions. So this graph comes from the U.S. Energy Information Administration's State Energy Data System, and it shows current transportation fuel consumption in New Mexico between unblended motor gasoline in the dark blue, ethanol the light blue, diesel in the red, which is we back out of that diesel number any volumes of biodiesel and list them separately in the black line at the very, very top. One thing you'll notice, and this segues into our discussion on biodiesel and renewable diesel, is the SEDS data, and this is through 2022, so I don't know what's happened since then, but through 2022 there were no renewable diesel volumes consumed for transportation in New Mexico, and as you can see, biodiesel is very, very small, well below what we would presume to be a 20% blend wall. So for those biofuels, there's a lot of kind of unrealized potential there. That's the big takeaway from just looking at this graph. Obviously, that leaves out electricity. Now, I would have loved to have included electricity in that last graph. That last graph was all in energy equivalent units, known as gigajoules. The issue is that the EIA tracks electricity consumption at the state level. It tracks residential, commercial, and industrial electricity consumption at the state level. It does not track transportation electricity consumption at the state level. So I couldn't include it. It's not that I have a grudge against electricity. I know many people here would take issue with that. What I do have, and what we have, is very good data on electricity from numerous other sources, Evaluate NM being one, and there's a link source that we are referring to. Colt knows a bit more about it than myself. That shows, with most recent data, electric vehicles growing to over 5% now of all new light-duty vehicle sales, and what's more, almost 1% of the total light-duty vehicle in use fleet. And so you can see that in this graph, the big growth in the top graph for both BEVs, or battery electric vehicles, in the dark blue series, and PHEVs, or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, in the light blue series. This is a cumulative graph. This is through the first half of 2023, and it shows 10,000 total BEVs and PHEVs, collectively known as zero emissions vehicles, or ZEVs. So over 12,000 ZEVs, 10,000 ZEVs on the road through the first half of last year. That was a year ago. So that growth has continued. We have seen 1,200 through the first half of last year new registrations of ZEVs in total in the light-duty market. That's approximately 400 per month. It's probably up now to about 1,500 per quarter, or about 500 per month. So it is an area of very rapid growth. The medium and heavy duty space, the numbers are lower, but the growth rate is actually quite high, and that is a very encouraging suggestion that there are unrealized gains there for further generation of clean fuels, because obviously electricity technically would be considered under this program a fuel for transportation. obviously there's range anxiety, there's where do I charge these vehicles, and so we also decided to look at charging ports and their locations. The two lines have a red line for direct current fast charge ports, or DCFCs, otherwise known as fast charging infrastructure, or FCIs. The green line for level 2 charging ports. This data goes through 2024. It's a snapshot as of June 1st, so earlier this month. And we see nearly 750 total charging ports in the state. One key takeaway from this map is if you look at the location of the blue dots for the fast charging ports, they are largely concentrated up and down the I-25 and I-40 corridors. So we're looking at big cities on major roadways that are getting those fast chargers. So there's also some room to grow there, perhaps in terms of something like a capacity credit for areas that are not on those already heavily frequented corridors and are perhaps more rural locations. One question that we got a lot of, and I know Mike is going to touch on later, is where we get our petroleum fuels now and what the petroleum fuels markets look like here in New Mexico. So I want to make a quick distinction about where we are with relation to the other clean fuel states. All three other clean fuel states are on the West Coast, and in this map of the United States, those states, Washington, Oregon, and California, are in the yellow shaded area that is for Petroleum Administration for Defense District 5, or PAD 5. The EIA still collects its most detailed data on the PAD level because there's enough aggregation to really get into stuff. New Mexico is the first state not part of PAD 5 in the United States that would have a clean transportation fuel standard. It's in the red region, which includes Texas and the Gulf Coast, what is known as PAD 3, which is qualitatively different, as I'll show. This map shows a breakout of just crude and petroleum product infrastructure, with the dark brown lines representing crude oil transport infrastructure, crude pipelines specifically. The barrels there are refineries. The beige colored lines are petroleum products, namely gas and diesel, predominantly transportation infrastructure, with those triangles representing terminals for distribution. You'll notice with the brown lines, New Mexico is the dark brown lines. New Mexico is sending a lot of its crude down to other PAD 3 refineries. Those refineries receive crude from all over the country. It has.
Did you cut off?
Which can you not? Oh.
I think he did. I'm online and I can't hear anything either.
It looks like he's on mute. His screen looks on mute.
Yeah, my screen was on mute. Sorry about that. It was the microphone that cut off, though. Am I helping you with this?
It looks frozen even.
I think they're having problems back there at the...
So is it like internet problems then? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is that a no? Wow, they can't hear. Oh. Okay, can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So we've unmuted my computer, which means we probably want to.
Oh.
This is where the magic happens. Yeah, this mic is where the magic happens. That's fine.
Okay.
All right, well, if you can hear me now, then let's continue. All right, our broadband. So we see that there's integrated crude infrastructure. We get a lot of our petroleum products back from the Gulf Coast where we sent our crude volumes. Those petroleum products are produced at refineries that are taking a mix of crude.
You're cutting in and out.
Sorry, I might have. Yeah, my bad. It's going to be a test for my fingers here.
Yes.
Pull it closer.
No, that was just Sam just let go of the button.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So yeah, our refineries, our consumption, our product supplied of motor gasoline and diesel in PAD 3 is almost entirely from refined products that come from PAD 3 refineries. So we're supplying a lot of our own. PAD 3 refineries take crude from a lot of different parts of the world,
And then they are the consumption of gasoline and diesel is largely, almost exclusively coming from those refineries, which is very, very different from the West Coast, which is getting their petroleum products from their refineries and some imports as well. Additionally, the crude that our refineries process, 75% of it is supplied in this pad, and that's all, the growth in the Permian Basin that you all have heard about, but also, not to be left out, still some Gulf Coast offshore that's plugging away. And if I left out anybody else's favorite basin in this room, please let me know. But about 3/4 of our crude is coming from refineries, that is refined by our refineries in this pad, is also being produced here. And so that's very different from pad 5, where all the current clean fuel states are located, for a number of important reasons. When you get to the life cycle fuel analysis, we do this thing called well-to-wheel. And well-to-wheel analysis to get a carbon intensity to show how much deficit or credit a fuel can produce has this kind of life cradle-to-grave type analysis that is done for each fuel. There's 2 general stages. One is well-to-pump, which is everything from extraction and mining, separation and gathering, refining, and then eventually taking that final product to the gas station or charging station. And then there is pump to wheel, which is the end use of that fuel and emissions that are related to the actual consumption, the actual combustion or consumption of fuel by the end user. These carbon intensity values below from the existing clean fuel states, again, all in pad 5, come from the most recent source for each. California and Washington's come from their most recently proposed rulemakings. Oregon's, as Corian can attest to, come from their quarterly fuel forecast, which is a regular update that they do that assesses carbon intensity values. These are not target values. These are the actual carbon intensity values based on this life cycle analysis of the gas and diesel that these states used. And you can see they're all over 100. Well, decisively over 100 in every case. Why does this matter for our carbon intensity? Well, those carbon intensities that you saw for pad 5 that were all in that triple-digit range are places where more gasoline and diesel is imported, is transported longer distances, and more of the crude that their refineries do process and sell is heavier crude varieties that require more downstream processing, which itself has its own process emissions. All of that went into those 100 plus numbers that you saw for their carbon intensities. With New Mexico, that's less the case. We have lighter crude slates that travel shorter distances to reach the end user from a cradle to grave standpoint. So we'll likely have lower carbon intensities as a result to start off with. This is the first discussion prompt where I'm going to turn to the floor and ask a couple of questions based on that information. The first is, what does it seem to you all like this will mean, this qualitative difference of lower carbon intensity baseline values for our gas and diesel for our clean fuels markets compared to those on the West Coast? And 2, what else do we need to know? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the floor. Feel free to raise your hand. But as Melissa noted, this is a 5-minute interval. Keep your comments short enough that other people get a chance to speak. And go.
Just want to make a quick comment on if you're factoring in the crude CIs for something like an MCON, you need to consider how you're going to do that for refineries that are out of the states, and you currently only have one refinery in the states, so how are you going to include that in your calculation? What assumptions are you going to make for the out-of-state crude intensity?
So we would use, oh wow, it holds itself now, Sam. Your job is done. I love it. So we would account, there wouldn't be a distinction between in-state versus out-of-state refineries. We would look at every refiner that moves its crude into New Mexico with an integrated life cycle model. The way that other states have done this is with the GREET model, and we would try to build off some of the work that they've done and account for those transportation distances, and also information on the slate of crude that they process, and if not, the actual crude qualities themselves. I do think refineries at the refinery level have to report their average API gravity and sulfur content. Maybe that gets aggregated at the state level, and if that's the case, we would probably look at something like downstream processing capacity utilization, which is a good enough way to back into how much additional work they have to do on that crude to get to your final MoGas and diesel. Brian.
Just a couple of quick items. Since New Mexico is a net importer of fuels in terms of gas and diesel and its baseline, a tremendous amount of that product is produced outside of the state, particularly Texas Panhandle, and as you've mentioned, coming as far south as the Gulf Coast. And so you've got a very different outlook in terms of what the crude slate is along the Gulf Coast refineries, which tend to be heavy crude refineries with heavier processing. So I want to make sure that you guys are cognizant of what that means in terms of the baseline, because you're looking at crudes from around the world in terms of overall perspective. Do you have a view yet of what that import-export balance is for the state of New Mexico?
For the products themselves, we have a pretty good idea of how much. I mean, we have 100,000 barrels a day of processing in Artesia, and that's it. So everything we consume, and a lot of that is self-sent to Texas. So it's a pretty small back out, almost 100% or approaching something close to 100% of what we're going to consume is going to come from out of state, and we're like fully cognizant of that. In terms of the heaviness of the crude that's processed in the Gulf Coast refineries, your point's very well taken that a lot of that is going to be imported and or heavier GOM Mars crudes that are produced off the Gulf Coast. Those volumes have gone down somewhat in recent years just with Permian growth, so there's kind of that's a bit of a balancing act, and it's about quantifying.
Absolutely, and kind of as a follow-on to that, when we talk about the import side of things, while there are some pipelines that feed some of the major markets, in particular Albuquerque, a lot of the product that's coming into the state is coming in the form of trucks. And so when we think about formulation of a program and what does that look like, you're looking to likely follow the models of the existing programs, which means you're looking at importer of record. And so from those physical activities, you're really talking about the party that purchased the fuel from an origin rack in Texas. And so it's not like in California where you're going to have an origin party and say, this is our producer, and we have X number of refiners, and this is a limited obligated party list. In this case, you're talking literally about obligating potentially truck stops and mom and pop gas stations that are picking up truckloads of fuel in Texas and bringing them back across. And so when we look at that distribution, it's going to be a very different market in terms of who the obligated parties are based upon both the physical logistics and upon the parties that are participating in the program and who's the importer of record. So,
yeah, I'll answer the question with a question. Do you happen to know the degree to which that trucking occurs, if at all, in West Coast states? I think there's some significant trucking there as well.
So in the West Coast, from an import perspective, and Sam can talk to this better than I can, but typically what you see is because of the spec of the gasoline is imported in bulk quantity on vessel, if it's coming in at all as a net import. The delta is produced on the West Coast in California refineries. There is some production on the West Coast of export grades that goes to Phoenix and ultimately goes to Nevada, but those are all CBOBs versus CARBOBs. So that unique grade of fuel pretty much indicates that it's either California produced with vessel import, or it is net import coming in from vessel. There's really not a lot of trucks that I know of that are going from refineries because there are no refineries really in, obviously, Nevada, Arizona, and so forth. So you're limited. The volume flows that way. There may be a little bit that comes from the northern end in Oregon, but Sam, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would say Oregon is the closest analogy. I defer to Corey and others. Oh, sorry, can you hear me on this one? Corey and or others who have more experience with Oregon that could probably speak to the imports there. They're the state that has a clean fuels program that lacks in-state refining.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to wrap this prompt up. We did have one question from online, Wish Krishnamurthy, and if you could keep it quick, then we'll have to move on.
Yeah, I have a comment, actually, more than a question. First of all, I didn't see any natural gas in here, in your fuel case. Are you not considering natural gas or biogas or biomethane in this case?
I think that natural gas is also, unfortunately, not broken out into transportation. That point is well taken, though. We did I think that's simply a nuance of the EIA data, as with electricity, in that it's residential, commercial, industrial, and I believe other for natural gas. And other can be transportation, it can be on any number of things, but they don't publish that number separately. That's a good flag.
And we should.
Okay, awesome. So in terms of how carbon intensity is determined, there's a lot of main pathways that we've learned about from observing those West Coast states. There are lookup table pathways that are in the actual rules in many of those states that produce generic carbon intensities for transportation fuels that they have modeled. Sometimes it can also be a temporary carbon intensity for fuels that need further determination but need something in the meantime. Then there are new fuel pathways where a producer says, hey, I've got this pathway, it's qualitatively different or substantially different in some way, shape, or form from what you have in your lookup table for my fuel. What do I do to get the carbon intensity that applies to me? So for that, we have tier 1 carbon intensities, which is if your fuel is a conventional fuel pathway. What we've seen from other states is that there's a tier 1 method where there's a simple carbon intensity value calculator that these states use. The fuel supplier gives them some basic inputs that they put into their model with documentation and justification, and they can plug that and chug that and get a carbon intensity. And that can also include some element of carbon intensity values that have been derived from other states. Sometimes it's best not to be first, because you can take carbon intensity values that have been derived from other states and adjust them for transportation distances and things of this nature. Tier 2 pathways are somewhat more involved. They're for either fuels that are unconventional or fuels that may be conventional, but the process of making them that they use is itself unconventional. Then there is this more fuel-specific tier 2 pathway where the supplier provides specific inputs, air permits, process flow diagrams, and their own life cycle CI report for the agency to review. This is not committing us to anything. This is simply what we have seen in practice from elsewhere. So 2 discussion prompts that emanate from this. The first being, given that we will likely use lookup tables for both regulated and some opt-in fuels, what do we need to be aware of in that first instance as we go out of the gate and are looking for just a basic template to work off of? 1. 2, what implications might this have for specific transportation fuels? So once again, I'll turn it back over to the floor for a 5-minute discussion. And I saw a couple of hands raised in the group. Did anybody?
I don't see any hands right now.
No hands raised right now? Okay.
Not right now.
Yeah, just Serena from Chevron. Yeah, it strikes me that the ability for New Mexico to quickly activate and start implementing the program requires some utilization of existing pathways from other states. The ability for staff to evaluate their own tier 1 CIs or tier 2 CIs at the beginning of the program is going to be very challenging. So to the extent possible to utilize some of those other lookup tables. I think the points that you raised regarding the baseline of the obligated fuels, the gasoline and diesel, is very important to consider, and the transportation fuels. My experience, transportation carbon intensities. My experience is that the modifications from the California and Oregon programs, from the Oregon and Washington programs from California are mainly focused on the transportation differences and not taking broad modifications of the CIs from the California program.
Okay. So we had Wish got his hand up first.
Gabriel Pisiniak, I think, is
Gabe,
next.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Go. Gabe, you want to go ahead?
Hi. Yeah, thank you. Just a real quick flag for NMED's attorneys that it's really critical if using a lookup table to be sensitive to a misperception that differences might be based on discrimination from origin, and that was an issue in California's program that was successfully resolved, but that this is an area to be really sensitive about Dormant Commerce Clause issues.
Thank you, and I think Wish is next.
It was Brian and then Jed Smith.
Okay.
I mixed Gabe and Wish up somehow.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead,
Well,
Brian.
Wish does have his hand.
Sure, just a couple of quick comments following on from Joe's comments around the pathways and utilization of lookups, and we agree that that's going to be the most expeditious way to get there. I think when we think about Tier 2, though, the question for me, because of the resources of the state and simply the depth of knowledge of the verifiers that are out there, it may be worth considering utilizing a verifier to process a Tier 2 type structure as well, and that would allow parties to move faster to lower carbon fuels that they can recognize what their individual facilities can accomplish in terms of low carbon fuels and reduction. It's beneficial for fuels across the board, everything from ethanol through biodiesel, renewable natural gas. So getting to that Tier 2 structure and having something that can facilitate faster adoption is probably a good thing. The second comment is really about the baselines and how you guys are looking at them. You know, with the 2018 baseline, you're in a very different place than is a California or some of the other markets, because ethanol is already a part of your fuel mix on a 10% basis. And so I'm really curious to see how you guys look to the carbon intensity numbers of those items, because effectively with a 10% baseline, you could have ethanol creating deficits in a very short period of time under a program structure.
Excellent. We had Jed and then Carl.
And Wish does have his hand up.
Oh, and Wish has his hand up. So Jed, Wish,
Yes.
Carl.
This is Jed. Yeah, so I think it's very important that we get the baseline correct. And then second to that, we need to do a deep dive into the carbon intensity of each of the transportation fuels and look at it outside of what the other state markets are doing, just to verify and to make sure that the calculations are correct.
Okay, excellent. And with the balance of our time, I know Wish and Carl are waiting. I want to just ask one follow-up question. And Wish and Carl, do you all mind holding on to your questions for the next prompt? Because there's another prompt coming up after this. And Jad, just a clarification, what do you mean by getting the baseline correct? Can you be more specific there?
Yeah, on the pathways for the conventional fuels coming into the state, it's important that you look at your crudes that are being refined, also the mileage, shipping it in, if it's rail, if it's truck. You have to look at all that very, very closely to make sure you have the true carbon intensity of those products.
Excellent. Thank you, Jed. Wish and Carl.
It really changes quite drastically depending on where that's coming from and if it's the crude product, where the origin and all that.
Okay, that's very helpful, and it tears off of Brian's comment earlier about the trucking and being aware of what that would mean for the ultimate CI values. Carl and Wish, if you could hold your thoughts, I'll go on to the next slide and we will come back to you. So Brian pointed out, for instance, carbon intensity values being affected by initial ethanol volumes being at that 10% blend rate. Another factor that we will want to consider with these standards is that we have put in place rules, new emission standards that will result in the increased use of electricity as a transportation fuel. These are requirements on the manufacturers of vehicles sold in New Mexico to have an increasing percentage of the vehicle fleet that they sell, that they send to dealers to sell here, be ZEVs, which again are both battery electric or BEVs and plug-in hybrids or PHEVs. That percentage increases up to 82% of new vehicles sold by 2032. One thing to keep in mind is so that just complying with that standard means a certain amount of electricity will also have to be used to fuel those vehicles, generating a certain amount of credits that are kind of going to be baked into hitting our targets. However, as you can see from this graph, the percentage of new sales, which is the light blue line, rises very quickly as a result of the standards. These are projections, by the way, from Eastern Research Group that were part of our economic analysis associated with the emission standards. The darker red line on the bottom, however, which is the ZEV percentage of the in-use fleet, trails. And that is because new sales don't reflect immediately the composition of the vehicles on the road right now, especially not in New Mexico, where our average lifetime ownership of a vehicle is actually longer than the national average. So there is some limit that puts then on the baked-in amount of credits generated simply from complying with these standards. This brings up two important discussion prompts, and Carl and Wish, we'll get to you first, and then what I would like the group to answer is one factor that will affect, that is not shown on this graph, how much credit can be generated from electric vehicles is the carbon intensity of the grid power, because again, it's well to wheel, cradle to grave, the carbon intensity of the grid power that is used to, or the distributed renewable power that is used to fuel those vehicles is going to be a factor. What do we need to calculate that? And how much of it will be used, one. And two, what are some considerations when looking at how to calculate that grid carbon intensity, whether it is wiser to use statewide numbers or, taking Washington State as an example, utility-specific numbers, and what resources go into those numbers. If P&M, for example, owns the Palo Verde plant and has that as part of their portfolio, and it's not here in New Mexico, but is owned by them and used to offset power consumed here, in effect reducing the carbon intensity of their grid. How does that factor in at all to calculating the carbon intensity and credits generated from their fuel? So, with those two discussion prompts in mind, we will go to Carl and then Wish.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask about aviation fuels. The airports all have sources of fuel, and jet fuel is not really included with what's called avgas. And I'm wondering, is the use of avgas and the quantities included in your calculations?
Avgas is aviation gasoline?
Right.
No, because it's not a regulated fuel under the program. It would be, I believe, an opt-in fuel. I don't think it would have, in states that, I can't say what we will or won't do in states that have done the program so far. I do not believe that avgas was part of the lookup table or treated as a regulated fuel. It could be an opt-in fuel, but would need to go through that Tier 1, Tier 2 process to generate a carbon intensity value of its baseline before determining its credits generated.
We have Wish, Alaric, and Gabe.
Wish, you're next.
Thanks. I have only a few comments, actually, and one question, really. From the last slide, the last section, rather, it's a good idea to use the lookup tables and various things, especially us being a relatively oil and agriculture state. Our best option to bring down emissions is going to be biofuels, whether it's biodiesel, biomethane, conversion, whatever. It appears it is a lot of variances in calculating that biofuel. So lookup table is a great idea. California has done a great job of that. So yeah, that's a great idea. That's a comment. Second one is, your carbon capture kind of situation, what we have unique in our state is we can sequester the carbon unlike other states, okay? At least the available allowed methodologies for sequestration. Will that be counted in this as to a reduction in the CO2 or the carbon intensity? Because that will make a big difference to what you try to do. It's going to cost more, but that's why the credits are there, right? So that's a second option, but I don't see that. Is that a different one? I've not seen that in the other, other lines in other states, but I don't know if that could be an issue here or not.
So
the third piece fits with, one last. The third piece fits actually with this one, because I was going to ask it in the last one, is your electricity source point, okay? There's a lot of different pieces for electricity source. Electric vehicles is one thing, but if your electricity is dirty, then it doesn't matter, right? So at the end of the day, that's where the cleanup has to happen. And there are many ways to do that. Just basically coming away from coal towards natural gas will be one, then natural gas to biogas will be another, or adding renewables is another. All those pieces matter, but I don't know, that's at the utility scale. But how are you going to play that game? I don't know. The credits maybe, because electricity is relatively a very cheap commodity at this point, and it'll take a lot of work to try to get the rates approved by people to be able to execute any of this. So that's a big tweak that we can't just say, oh yeah, if you reduce the CI score of the electricity, it'll be great. But how?
Yeah, absolutely. The third question is kind of a question to the group of what the best way to do that is in terms of what policies we set. In terms of what industry does, we let you all figure that out. We set the rules, and that kind of segues into your second question, which is how CCS, carbon capture and sequestration, might be taken into account. It would depend on what stage of the fuel making process it fits into, because it takes many forms. You could be capturing from a power plant, that would lower your grid CI. You could be capturing from a refinery, that might lower your deficits. The questions abound. My answer created new questions, so let's hold on to those, because Alaric had one, and we're talking about his field here, so it will be important to hear from him.
So we have quite a few folks who would like to speak on this topic. We're actually done with this prompt unless we want to add another minute or two. Okay.
I think so.
So next is Alaric, and well, I'm going to tell you the whole list, because if we don't get to this prompt, we might get it into the next. Alaric, Gabe, Graham, Kara, Brian, and Mr. Barrielos, who's the first name I forgot. Eduardo, yeah.
What is the process question?
Perfect. So thank you for recognizing.
Let's start with the process question.
So obviously, these questions are great, and there's a lot of opportunity for discussion. I don't think we all are going to get to it, so I'm wondering what will be the best channel to provide further recommendations after this meeting is concluded.
I think I can answer that.
Okay.
So when the final report from the committee is issued, that's the opportunity for members of the advisory committee and members of the public to provide as much commentary as you like. So you may want to take note of the questions and then address them in the final report. That's really the only way. Verbally during this meeting and commenting on the final report.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So Alaric.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. Can you all hear me? Quick check. Okay, great. And I will speak a little bit more about this later, so I'll be very brief. But since PNM was called out specifically, I at least wanted to take a moment. So one, talking about Palo Verde, PNM is going to start exiting those leases, actually. But I do think that this really speaks to the fact, but I understand it was more of a hypothetical question about how do you calculate that. So first and foremost, I think that those nuances speak to the fact that a utility-specific carbon intensity is going to be best practice here rather than a statewide average. As you all are aware, we have the Energy Transition Act, and the investor-owned utilities have different milestones and goals than the rest of the state and the cooperatives. And so rather than having a single carbon intensity, these are things that utilities report on already on at least an annual basis, if not more frequently. So, but I do think that specific grid mix, regardless of the type of generator, utilities should have an opportunity to report on that. As far as what data is needed, there's a lot that goes into this. I think some of this was already spoken about, but the efficiency of EVs themselves are going to need to have an additional multiplier. One thing that I know Wish said that I do want to comment on as well is, even if the grid was 100% coal, there are still less emissions from an EV than an internal combustion engine. So while the grid right of today is much cleaner than that, and it's getting much cleaner as part of the Energy Transition Act, I do want to make it clear that even with the dirtiest grid, you will see an emissions reduction.
True, I agree, Alec, that's a good point. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Pasiniak? Or Dr.
Great, thank you.
Pasiniak, sorry.
And I think
Mr.
fine.
I'm at UNM too. I get
Gabe
it.
is even better. So just an excellent prompt, and I think really raises some great issues. I just want to flag the equity issue here, and I don't have an answer, but I think it would be important to look at if there was a utility by utility carbon intensity for electricity. Then I think it would be important to look at what the rural co-ops would be looking at in terms of carbon intensity. There's a concern that we're going to have less electric vehicle adoption in those co-ops if they're then subject to a lower carbon intensity. They're going to get fewer credits that they can reinvest into promoting vehicle electrification. So I think it'd be at least worthwhile to consider those equity impacts on rural consumers, and think about whether there are ways to equitably spread the benefits of this policy with regards to electrification.
Thank you. So I think we need to move along, but I will say we're going to keep the same list. So Graham, Kara, Brian, you will be called on next at the next prompt, and you can return to this topic if you like, or the next topic.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome.
Also, you're doing an awesome job.
Thank you. You are too.
Thank you. This is a shameless act of highway robbery, pun intended. For this slide, I lifted all the data for this graph from Corey Ann's fantastic presentation at our last meeting. And what it shows is a percentage, comparison of the proportions of credits generated by transportation fuel in the 3 existing low carbon fuel standard states on the West Coast. What you'll notice is there is just a huge variation between states. It's very clear. There's more than one way to eat this Reese's. You'll see California getting much more of its credit from electricity and renewable diesel, for example. Oregon is kind of between California and Washington, which is sort of on the other bookend in terms of how much of its credit is coming from ethanol, and Oregon is generally in between those two states, with the caveat that it is getting a lot more credit from biodiesel. I'll also mention, because Sam is sitting right next to me and I don't want to make him angry, that California also has a significantly large amount of credits from renewable natural gas, or RNG, and there's various issues associated with that. That's all table setting for what I'd like us to explore next, which is just what fits into this giant red question mark. What is New Mexico gonna look like? And Wish has already sort of alluded to that a little bit, and others in their comments thus far. But we will begin to explore that more after the break, beginning with Travis. In the meantime, I know we had a few more questions we want to make sure to get to.
We do, and just also I want to say that as we continue through this meeting today, we've heard from some people multiple times and others not at all. So if there are folks who haven't gotten a chance to speak, I'm going to make sure when your hand goes up, I'll include you, even if you're not at the top of the list. But right now we have Graham next.
Great. I just wanted to pick up on 2 topics. The first on the avgas front, in terms of what we've seen in other programs there. First of all, in the aviation sector, so far there's not been any obligation imposed either on the gasoline side or on the conventional jet fuel side in terms of accruing an obligation based on supply. California does have a proposal to impose an obligation on intrastate fuel that's in discussion, but we haven't come to the end of that rulemaking. Thus far, all of the crediting that has been on an opt-in basis, as was said, has been only on the jet fuel distillate side for what's called alternative jet fuel or sustainable aviation fuel. Right now, to my knowledge, there is no avgas that would be a low carbon avgas, so to speak, and the program structure has not been extended to make that an opt-in fuel in terms of not being defined yet. The other quick thing I wanted to say on substance was also raised, that is the carbon intensity of the electricity. This is just sort of a complicated area that is really important to think through, and so this committee will want to consider it. Typically, in the California program, we do have the EPA grid mix used. As was said by Alaric, we could, this could be a decision to go utility specific on carbon intensity. There's also the ability in the California program, for instance, to source zero carbon intensity electricity or even sub-zero carbon intensity electricity, particularly for electric vehicles or production of electrolytic hydrogen. There's discussion about extending that out to sustainable aviation fuel and providing facilities access, and that's documented by renewable energy certificates. So I want to cut my comments there, but just wanted to provide that additional input. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Next is Kara.
Good morning, everyone. I just have two comments in response to the two slides that were shown recently. The first is for NMED, a utility-specific CI raises the question that possibly that could push up against PRC jurisdiction. So I think that would be a question to look at. And then also, our utilities are, required to meet the renewable portfolio standard, which closely, I think it would closely track or be related to a carbon intensity. And so consideration of the renewable portfolio standard will need to be made and may help guide a carbon intensity standard if we are looking at utility-specific CIs.
Helpful to keep in mind, and a good flag. Do we have?
We do have a couple more folks, but I just want to check and see, are there any advisory committee members who have not spoken yet that would like to make a comment or ask a question? If not, we can hear from Brian.
Just a couple of quick items going back to the previous section. Specifically, Mike, you mentioned the EV mandates, and those are referring back to ACC2 adoption. You also mentioned that you guys are currently at a sales rate of about 5.4%, 5.3 something percent. Under that ACC2 adoption, you're following California's model exactly. And so that would mean that by 2026, you'd need to be to 43%, and then growing, as you mentioned, into the 80 percentile by 2032. What are the teeth that are in that program? Because as I understand it from reading there, it appears that it's more of an offered for sale versus another. And so the concern would be is what do you guys do in the face of a lack of available credits coming from that particular avenue? So that's kind of question one. And then following on to some other comments from a few of the other members, on the electricity baseline, I think that looking to an individual production facility makes sense in terms of it, just like you would look at an ethanol or a biodiesel or renewable diesel producer's facility. But because we're talking about transportation fuels and the rules are specific to transportation fuels, those same producers should be held to a baseline standard of 2018, and then look to have an obligation to actually reduce those numbers of the volumes that are going into EV utilization. In other words, what's being used
should be being reduced on the same schedule that all other transportation fuels are based on the way that the regulation is written. So it's not so much that it's if they do an incremental project to lower carbon intensity, that's fantastic, and they should have a credit generating opportunity, but there should also be an obligation to follow the reduction standard that's set forth in the regulation, because it is a transportation fuel and it is part of a baseline number that's there. And then the third comment is talking about the multiplier that was referenced, and I think just the comment there is that in a vehicle multiplier, that is not a fuel calculation, that's actually a vehicle calculation. And so when we're talking about lowering the carbon intensity of fuels, you really need to be looking at the base fuel, not at some sort of a multiplier that is tied to a vehicle calculation.
Okay. I'm going to call it into this part of the meeting. Thank you for all the comments and discussion. We will now take a 10-minute break, so please return at 10:47, and then we'll hear from Travis Madsen about credit generation best practices. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, you too.
Are we going to have a comment section on this slide before we start the next one?
Can you repeat that, Wish? Sorry.
Are we going to have a comment section on this slide where you're stopped with this question mark before we start the next one? Or
no, we're just taking a break now. Just going straight to break.
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Thanks. I talk too much. I need to calm down on the other side.
Wish is why we love
You
you.
have good things to say.
Same way. It's just a question. So I think kind of what I
Okay, we're calling the meeting back to order.
That seems like one of those things we're talking about right now is the potential of new technology, and 10 years from now, it's going to be like a matter of course. Right?
Yeah, it's like, of course, we know.
Travis, would you like to sit in the presenter's seat?
I could stay, I don't mind staying here.
Okay, let's make sure the technical folks.
I can move.
That's okay, wherever you want.
Oh, it says presenter.
We just wanted to make sure there was a seat for the presenters so they didn't get, so they have space. Okay, I'm calling the meeting back to order. If you could please take your seats. Our next speaker is Travis Madsen. Mr. Madsen, if you can keep your presentation to 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll have some prompts after that, which I will read out for the group, and you can respond to them if you feel that's appropriate. Okay? And so, Mr. Madsen is going to speak about credit generation best practices, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this committee and for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I'm going to talk at a high level, building on the discussion from Mr. Ford just now, about some of the decisions that we're going to be making around credit policy in the New Mexico Clean Fuel Standard. And just to remind folks, my name is Travis Madsen. I direct the transportation program at the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. It's a nonprofit public interest advocacy organization that works regionally. And I'm coming at this with the perspective of somebody who wants to make sure that New Mexico hits its climate targets, that we maximize the value that we can get out of this program for the people of New Mexico, and also to advance equity, to ensure that everybody who lives here can participate in the clean energy transition and then benefit from it. So with that, I'm going to talk at a high level about what kinds of things I'm thinking about in terms of clean fuel credits. In an ideal world, credits are for activities that produce real emission reductions. So I'm talking about activities that actually reduce carbon emissions as opposed to illusory emissions reductions that might be the result of an accounting error. I think credits should also be ideally additional, building on existing policies and amplifying their impact, and avoiding double counting emissions reductions that might be happening through another avenue. Credits should be verifiable, meaning that regulators can audit a clean fuel pathway to confirm that the assumptions that went into the calculation for the carbon intensity of a fuel are accurate and current, and give us confidence that what we think we're getting from the program lines up with what that legislation actually requires. Credits are also ideally for permanent activities. So for example, the classic example is you wouldn't want to be giving credit for planting trees as a part of this program, for example, because the carbon stored in the tree is still part of the active carbon cycle, and all it would take would be a fire to put that carbon back into the atmosphere where it can contribute to climate change again. So we want to focus on activities that result in more permanent emission reductions. And then lastly, ideally credits are enforceable. So if the regulators were to identify a problem in a clean fuel pathway and an area where there was an inaccuracy and we weren't getting the actual results we thought we were getting, that they would be able to take a corrective action. Not every credit is going to be perfect. There are going to be some gray areas. And when I'm thinking about credit policy, there's, I think, some big picture goals and values that I would like to see the credit generation align with. Top of the list for me is to align the program with state and national climate targets. I'm thinking both about the short-term targets as well as the long-term. So on the short-term level, Governor Lowen Grisham's executive order aiming for a 45% emissions reduction economy-wide by 2030 is coming up quick. And then at the long term and at the national level, we're aiming for a net zero economy by 2050. And specifically in the transportation sector, if you look at the U.S. National Blueprint for Transportation Decarbonization, that implies an 80 to 100% reduction in transportation emissions, and maybe some carbon storage to fill in the gap to reach net zero by mid-century. Those are both major challenges, and different strategies will be required to meet them. And I think we should be including pathways to hit both of those within the design of this program. The second pillar, I think, is to maximize the co-benefits. So if we're making decisions about what should qualify for credit or what shouldn't, or what kind of limits we might need to be putting on certain types of credits, I'd like to see attention paid to maximizing the extra value that we can extract for the program for the people of New Mexico. Top of the list, consumer cost savings, increases in transportation energy efficiency, local economic growth, improvement in public health and local air quality. And then a big one is also equity, so making sure that everyone in New Mexico has the opportunity to participate in this transition to a sustainable transportation system, as well as to benefit from it, and to ensure that the program is fair and includes everyone. And then third, to minimize externalities. This is not a complete list of things we need to be paying attention to, but we want to avoid imposing excess costs on consumers. We want to avoid problems that like interfering in the food market and causing disruptions in the food supply or cost of the food supply, or unwanted land use changes. So, for example, if we're driving deforestation in the Amazon as forests are cleared for soybean oil production, for example, I think that would be a negative externality that we would want to take steps to reduce the impact of. So, taking that all into consideration, what should qualify for credit under this program? Here's my opinion, and I hope it stimulates some discussion amongst the committee and provides some useful thoughts for NMED as they design the rule. I think, as Mr. Ford just presented, basically any transportation fuel that has a certified carbon intensity benefit should qualify for credit. I think some of the presentations following mine will go into the details about what some of those fuels are and what the benefits of deploying them might look like. But beyond that, When we're thinking in particular about the long-term climate goals for the state and the nation, I think the program needs to include some pathways to help scale zero-emission technologies. So mainly there I'm thinking about electric vehicles and hydrogen. There might need to be some special types of credits included specifically to help those technologies scale. For example, California, in the early years of the program, offered capacity-based crediting for EV charging infrastructure when there weren't that many EVs on the road and the utilization of the stations was small. That helped avoid the chicken and egg problem where people might have been hesitating to buy an EV because they didn't think there was enough charging infrastructure available. And New Mexico could be in a similar situation where incentivizing the construction and build out of the charging network might help inspire more people to choose to drive an electric vehicle, and I think the same applies for hydrogen as well. We could also look at Oregon, which offers an advanced crediting option for electric vehicles where certain commercial fleets are allowed to claim 6 years worth of credits up front, and that enables them to put the value of those clean fuel credits into the capital stack necessary to acquire an electric vehicle. So some of the fleets that are benefiting from that in Oregon are school buses, garbage trucks, transit fleets, that sort of thing. So I think it could be useful for New Mexico to look at a mechanism like that would help fleets acquire EVs, which then locks in a set of climate benefits over time. Lastly, this is not an exhaustive list of ideas here, but I've been hearing from the New Mexico Auto Dealers Association that they're anticipating some difficulties in implementing the recently passed state EV tax credit. I could imagine a special avenue being built into the clean fuel standard here that could help auto dealers manage the financial challenges of offering the state tax credit cash on the hood for consumers. Again, that would be a tool to help deploy an electric vehicle, which would lock in a certain amount of climate progress over time. And again, this would also apply to hydrogen or any other kind of zero-emission technology that's going to be important to reach the 2050 net zero target. So I think within the crediting system, we're also going to need to look at guardrails to keep the market on track. That might include limits on the quantity of certain types of credits. So, for example, in the California context, advocates have talked about, for example, placing a limit on the quantity of crop-based biofuels that are eligible for credit within the program to keep, to minimize unwanted externalities and to keep the market effective at driving investment in clean transportation writ large. Maybe we also need to look at limitations on the duration. Like, for example, maybe capacity-based credits should only be allowed for 5 years, just to throw that number out there. Because after that time, there'll be enough EVs on the road that we won't need to support the construction of charging stations with that mechanism anymore. So when figuring out, I think, what kind of guardrails are necessary, it's really helpful to have a model of the policy so you can sort of game out what are the consequences of certain program design decisions before the program is launched. I don't know if New Mexico has one of these in the works or not, but I reached out to Colin Murphy at the UC Davis Institute of Transportation Studies, who's done this kind of modeling in the Pacific Coast context, and he indicated that he would be interested in helping New Mexico apply the model that he's designed, maybe teach some local academics how to use the model and maintain it over time. And that could result in maybe a stream of graduate students that have trained on clean fuels concepts that NMED could recruit to staff to staff the program. And then I think the last thing I wanted to point out is there's a section in the statute, section 4C3, that points towards additional credit opportunities from activities and projects that's the support of removal of greenhouse gas emissions associated with transportation in the state. And I'd like to encourage NMED to look at that section in in a broad way. So if you look at the transportation decarbonization blueprint, clean vehicles and clean fuels are a big part of the solution, but we also need to improve the efficiency of the overall transportation system with transit and location-efficient land use. And I see the potential for including in this policy maybe a special carve-out or a pool of credits that would be focused more on those types of solutions that have, I think, a special value in the equity front and could ensure that a greater variety of New Mexicans are incorporated into the policy and can participate in the transition to a clean transportation system. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Mr. Matza. I'm going to go ahead and call out the prompt. And as I mentioned, if you want to, if there's something you want to respond to, you're welcome to do that. We have 5 minutes for this prompt, asking each person to keep their comment to 1 minute. I'll call on you first. The prompt is, what do other members see as best practices that NMED should consider for the program? Mr. Barrientos.
Yeah, thank you so much, Travis. A really good list. I really like your slide that it says, for example, that the carbon intensities need to be measurable and achievable. I think that covers a lot of points for. Also, I want to remind this team that we have a bill that has specific provisions, and one of the clear provisions of the bill is technology neutrality. So we start talking about specific credits, specific multipliers, or specific aspects that favor one technology over another. That would not be contemplated when the technology neutrality provision of the HB 41 bill that was passed and signed into law. So for instance, capacity credits based on your slides, is not measurable. It's actually creating infrastructure for enablement of a particular technology, but it doesn't have a carbon intensity measurability, so it wouldn't be quantified with the credits. And I think states like Oregon actually identified that as an issue, and they excluded it from their program. So I would definitely state that capacity credits should not be part of this particular program. It's not technology neutral, because if we are incentivizing infrastructure, it should be for all clean fuel pathways, not only a couple of specific ones. The other aspect is vehicle purchase incentives. That's again could be considered as a non-technology neutral principle, because it's incentivizing one technology versus another's. And I'm going to also get to the point that Brian mentioned before. So when we talk about multipliers for technologies, in particular considering what the vehicle utilization is, that is a very complex issue, because the credits are on a measure of carbon intensity of fuel delivered. We don't know where that fuel is going to be delivered to what type of vehicles, and that efficiency of that vehicle is going to depend on a vehicle per vehicle basis, right? Like we can say that an F-150 Lightning is not as efficient in energy economy as a Tesla Model Y, right? So I think those are issues that are better left into vehicle attributes, and they're already contemplated in legislation such as the petroleum equivalence fuel factor that goes into the fuel economy at the federal level. There's many aspects there, so just to pigeonhole a couple of things, I think we need to stay core to the bill that was signed, which is technology neutral, is one of the key provisions there. And B, as we're considering some of these other compliance flexibilities, we need to evaluate them in a way that is measurable, like you said, and also in an apple-to-apple basis where they can be compared in a fair and equitable system. So I'm going to pause there.
Thank you, sir. Did you have your own?
I did, just quickly. I mean, Ethan Epstein, what resonated with me on that list of core principles was the verifiability. And the reason that I say that might be for reasons that others aren't really thinking about. I think of verifiability being very important at the state transferable incentive level for fraud prevention. And we saw that occur with states that created incentives that could be transferred at the state level in many, many states. And so when I think of verifiability, I think of certification processes that the state has done to avoid those problems. There's a certification process between agencies and other green programs that I'd like to discuss later on. Yes, thanks.
Thank you. And next is Mr. Willingham.
Hi, everyone. This is Anthony Willingham from Electrify America. In support of capacity credits, what they do is incentivize bigger and faster stations, DC fast charging stations, and also on-site battery storage. What we're seeing at stations now, the typical Electrify America station was 4 dispensers, each providing up to 150 kilowatt charging speeds. What we're seeing now is that's just not enough to meet the demand of today, and so it definitely won't be enough to meet the demand of the future. Having the ability for capacity to generate credits enables us to build bigger stations with more dispensers so that more people can charge, faster chargers so that turnover can be much quicker, and reduces each of these things, reducing the potential for queuing and having slower charging sessions. Also, battery storage helps reduce stress on the electrical grid. So reduce stress on the electrical grid so that that cost there is not imposed onto the utilities. So yeah, that would be the reason to support capacity credits.
Thank you. Brian?
So just Travis, coming back to the commentary on the capacity credits around purchases, I agree with Eduardo around the process, and that we need to look very closely at the language in the bill around technology neutrality. You specifically called out Section 4C3, and it references technology neutrality. Section 1 also does, and it's worth looking at those in a very clear and concise manner as they apply to all transportation fuels. I think that's critical to get a program that actually will achieve what you're looking to achieve. And then second, I heard you mention as an alternative or as an option crop caps, and so I'm interested in talking a little bit about that. Obviously, we're a large ethanol producer, and ethanol is a key factor in gasoline today at a 10% range. But by doing crop caps, there are a number of things. One, you look to block access to things like CCS on fermentation and those types of processes. And so normal capture reductions of carbon intensities and lowering carbon intensities block pathways if you begin to put in crop caps. The same thing is true when you look at what has been the only methodology for successful cellulosic generation outside of bio-RNG or biogas to RNG. And that is the new developments that we're seeing in some of the corn ethanol plants that are moving on to cellulosic. And then thirdly, you also, if you guys ever get to a point where we do SAF crediting, there are pathways that all start with ethanol, and a crop cap could impede the access to early generation around SAF and specifically around the utilization of low carbon aviation fuel. So crop caps are something that I think need to be thought of in context of where we are, both in terms of a low carbon market as well as what it could look like and what frankly our fuel supplies are for the country and how we're set up. This is something that starts with USDA and comes all the way down.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to move us along to the next prompt, which is, what criteria should NMED require third-party verifiers to incorporate in their evaluations and reports to NMED?
I'll take a stab at that. Same way with the RNG Coalition. So I think the first step that you should seriously think about is the accreditation process, by which you get a list of verifiers that you're comfortable are capable of verifying against the rules, and potentially piggybacking off of the process that's being used by California, Oregon, and Washington. And then the specific items that the third-party verification firm would be able to verify and assist with, pathway processing would certainly be top on our list, because it has been relatively slow in California and other places where there's a check by the regulatory agency, there's a check by the verifier, and there's a lot of overlap between those two things. So if you could do anything with the third-party verification to increase the timelines with respect to pathway certification, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Next is from online is Corianne Wind.
Yeah, hi everyone. I guess I just wanted to kind of like make a comment about this third-party verification too. So I think, the third-party verification, I think, plays a very important role in this program. I think what some people forget, though, is that the third-party verifiers are verifying the requirements that are established by the regulation. So it isn't a separate set of requirements that they're verifying too. So if NEBD establishes that third-party verification is required for certain things, for fuel transactions, for pathway applications, for project verification, whatever the regulation actually requires, that is what they should be verifying too, not an external set of additional requirements.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on this topic? I don't see anyone else's hand raised, so let's go on to the next topic, which is how can NMED make it as easy as possible to generate credits while ensuring that credits represent real reductions in carbon intensity?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Yes. How can NMED make it as easy as possible to generate credits while still ensuring that credits represent real reductions in carbon intensity? Mr. Barrientos.
I think
Mr. Epstein.
I think something that we have seen from other programs, in particular in Canada as well, and something that agencies from Washington and Oregon would recommend greatly is to have an implementation period where you have basically the opportunity to the agency to get acquainted with the program, get all the tools in place. So that period will be a period of non-obligations. It could be 6 months, it could be a year. And during that period, enable a lot of these pathways to be get into applications, certified and verifiable. So that will be a particular recommendation for consideration of this group and for the agency to have an implementation period without obligation and even potentially early credit generation for getting accessibility and getting the program running and in good shape for compliance.
Thank you. Mr. Epstein.
Yes, ma'am. My only comment is very quick. I think I've seen several green programs in New Mexico die for lack of participation as a consequence of state agencies processing and certifying the underlying green transactions too long. And so therefore it takes too long to get the underlying incentive, cause the underlying transaction to take place. And so if you want an effective program, you're definitely going to have to be able to produce these credits in an effective, quick way. Thanks.
Okay, next is Gabe.
Thanks for the opportunity to comment, and I just wanted to go back to some comments about technology neutrality with regards to crediting, and just point out that the bill does specifically include language directing NMED to include additional credit opportunities for activities and projects that support reduction or removal of greenhouse gas emissions associated with transportation in the state. So I think that it's important to read that technology neutrality piece, keeping that in mind and recognizing that the legislature explicitly directed NMED to consider things that could include something like capacity credits. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. We're going to take two more comments on this topic, and then we're going to move on. So Jessica and Brian, and then Wish, you'll be called next in the next opportunity. Jessica, please go ahead.
Thank you. I would just like to speak a little bit to the fact that we're all talking about pathways here, and that's obviously incredibly important to generating credits. But if the way that California does it, there are the subsurface permits that are called the permanent applications. Personally, as somebody who's permitting, it's incredibly challenging having the state have an entirely separate Class 6 application that has to be reviewed and approved on top of your EPA or state-specific application. So yes, I understand that the state, if they're generating credits, would like to ensure that it stays underground safely and that you're generating credits from actual stored CO2. But having a second application in the state of CARB, which I believe it's Washington or Oregon, I think it's Washington, has also adopted CARB subsurface application approval, is incredibly expensive. They have a lot more stringent monitoring requirements. There's also a lot of risk to Class 6 operators because If CARB denies our subsurface application, but the EPA approves it, we have to start CARB back over and the EPA back over. So to the end that we want to ensure compliance, but also make sure that the market gets going. I think that New Mexico should trust that the EPA knows what they're doing and that they have subsurface authority and let them permit projects in the subsurface, particularly in projects out of state that are sequestering in other states and then shipping their fuels to New Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you. And Brian?
Just a couple of quick comments. So playing off of what Eduardo had mentioned earlier in terms of an implementation, what we saw in California and what we've seen in other programs is that they've done effectively a reporting only period to begin with. So not just a credit generating period, but one where you get reports, and that allows the state to see what's coming in, get a better ascertain of what the program looks like. You also will get some cost look in terms of what credits are costing as those products are coming to the marketplace. And then the second one is to your question around how do you make sure that you get clear, verifiable products to begin with. And I think that's inherent in the verification process. And so if you adopt a strong verification process that mirrors one that say is done in California or one of the other models, then you have an inherent process that resolves the issues of risk around whether those products are truly getting the low carbon intensity numbers that you're looking for. And then you couple that with how you set up your tier 1 and tier 2 adoptions. And I think you can see a program that really begins to make sense by shaping it in that way. And so that gets you your fast adoption by being able to bring those pathways over.
So I'm going to move us along now. We're actually going to have Mr. Alaric Babé present about electricity. Alaric, please keep your comments 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll have a 5-minute period for comments on his presentation. Wish I still have you on the stack, so you'll have a chance to speak then. Other folks, if your hands are still up online and you're done, please take them down so I don't get confused. And Alaric is joining us online, so the microphone is yours, Alaric.
And Alaric, when you want me to change a slide, just let me know.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. And my apologies, I can't be there in person today. But thank you for the flexibility to present while I'm remote. So I'll talk a little bit about electricity. We can go to the next slide and I'll keep it moving. So I know we're sort of talking a lot about this today, which is good timing, I think, for this presentation. So one of the things I want to talk about fueling EVs, and we did see from our colleagues at NMED that they didn't have exact data on the fuel distributed for EVs because it's inherently difficult to measure that exactly. As many of you may know, people that might use an EV just for commuting plug in at level 1 charging often, which is a fancy way of saying they just plug into the wall, which certainly would not be submetered. Some people might have a hardwired level 2 charger at their home, but even that typically does not have a submeter on it. The story continues at businesses if they have level 2 chargers either for their fleet or customers. That's typically just on their own service panel. So it's really hard to get visibility directly into that charger. It's a little bit different with DC fast charging. Those more often are directly metered. So it'd be a little bit easier there. But I just want to make the point that getting that exact data for every EV out there and all of the kilowatt hours dispensed strictly into those EVs is difficult. But the verifiable and measurable data that we do have is an EV adoption data. So I can speak from a P&M standpoint. We do receive EPRI adoption data every month. And so this includes both the market rate, which was that higher number, right? I mean, I think statewide it's 5-something%. We're a little bit higher in P&M service areas. We are more urban. And also the vehicles in operation per county. So I can say with a degree of certainty exactly how many EVs are out there. It's also very well understood approximately the energy usage from those EVs in the aggregate. And so by using those measurable pieces of data, we are able to provide an estimate, at least an estimate for the fuels consumed. This estimate could then also be verified. Some utilities do have access into certain chargers, and so a sample size could be taken where you could verify that consumption data. Some of the regulations that I want to draw attention to, which really just underscore the things that I'm talking about here, is one, the New Mexico Building Code. So just recently, New Mexico adopted the 2021 IECC, which does include all new residential construction be EV ready. So there's a 240 volt outlet in the garage. And then for commercial properties, depending on what they are, it's anywhere between 5 and 15% either have to be EV ready or EV capable spaces. And so as you can know, if anyone's gone out there and bought an EV, a lot of them come with a 240 volt charging cable in the trunk that can plug directly into the wall at a new residence. And so installing something like submetering is not part of that. And so it makes that question of trying to install submetering even more difficult. So I just want to call attention to one section of the statute here, section 4C5. It does say that if utilities are going to participate in the market, that they have to reinvest all of their revenues in activities that will further advance transportation electrification. So this could be a lot of things, such as distribution upgrades or other programs, but it's all revenues minus any administration costs. Some of the things I've seen in other states, I've mentioned submetering a couple of times, that would be incredibly cost prohibitive to go back and reinstall metering. Another option is vehicle telematics, so speaking directly to the vehicle. However, I do want to make it clear that this would have to be an opt-in program, and a significant incentive would need to be paid to every driver to allow access into their vehicle to track their exact consumption. So all of those very burdensome administrative costs would come out of the revenues that utilities could invest back into the grid. So these are not revenues that go into the utilities' pockets. These are revenues that are reinvested back into the grid to maintain a safe and reliable system. Moving on. So talking a little bit about carbon intensity, I mentioned this in my comments previously, but utilities do currently report their carbon intensity, at least on an annual basis. This really just underscores all utilities are a little bit different. We're all moving in the same direction, but those carbon intensities are quite different. The one thing I wanted to draw attention to here, and I've heard some comments today already, but the carbon intensity of the fuel itself is really only part of the equation because EVs are so much more efficient. You can see there a quick quote and some diagrams. This is from the U.S. Department of Energy. So EVs are about 77% efficient, whereas internal combustion is anywhere from 12 to 30%. And when we're thinking about this, looking at the statute, what it's interested in is reducing the life cycle emissions from fuels. That life cycle emissions in the statute is defined as the distribution and end use consumption. So really well to wheel. And this is why you need to be able to take into account that sort of multiplier to get that well to wheel or that end use consumption rather than well to tank, which would fundamentally change the life cycle emissions. Next slide. And finally, this is just a quick slide on capacity credits. Myself as a utility, I don't have a whole lot, we don't, at least at P&M, we don't own and operate charging stations, but this is an opportunity for charging stations to earn credits for the total capacity. We do understand that a significant barrier to distributing more fast charging are things like utility demand charges. This sets that minimum instantaneous power that's delivered to a station. But with a low utilization rate, especially in more rural areas, it's hard to overcome that high demand charge with the kilowatt hour sales that might be happening. So, this is just an example or maybe a suggestion for the group, something to discuss, that possible capacity credits could be used for the charging networks to buy down those utility demand charges and therefore get over that hump of deploying more charging, faster charging, reducing charging times, and really making that a viable business model. So that's it for me. I wanted to keep it really short. I do appreciate the opportunity to present, and I'm happy to hear any comments or questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Babe. We appreciate your presentation. We have a couple people in line to speak already, so Wish, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you, Melissa. I think Babe, that was a fantastic presentation. One of the comments, I'll make this comment first, okay, because this is more pertinent to the one we just heard, is at the end of the day, he's right, which is it has to be the amount of CO2s in transportation, especially in mobile transportation, as to grams of CO2 per mile. rather than grams of CO2 per megawatt hour, kilowatt hour, or megajoule, the actual number should be grams of CO2 per mile. And that will take into account engine efficiency, it'll take into account mileage of a car, all those things to account to be able to go do that. So unfortunately, because we do it as grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour or an energy basis, it's a slightly different situation. So yeah, even when we did hydrogen, that's what we were pushing for, because the hydrogen guys use the same electric engine, which is much more efficient than a diesel engine. So I don't know how that gets reconciled, but that is definitely a very important point. Okay, so thanks for that. That's an important clarification. My original comment really quickly was about the pathways for ethanol and a variety of ones that already you can see the carbon intensity numbers for. It's like we have to be careful. We have to do a lot of learnings from California, Oregon, and everybody else, not just copy it, because we have to improve on the situation that already exists. Which what I mean by that is, even if you take renewable solar into consideration, what is the true carbon intensity of a megawatt hour or a kilowatt hour of solar? Okay, there is not too much information on that, because there's a lot of things that have to go into solar cell manufacturing. All of the things create carbon, okay, CO2. So there is a lot of things that are not taken into consideration because we just want to kind of not worry about it and just focus on fossil fuels, which is important for a first cut. But we should start thinking a little more deeper into what are the true carbon intensities today for the well-to-wheel emissions that we are looking at. And starting with California pathway, starting with Oregon, and starting with EPA's numbers, there may be additional pieces that need to be added on to get a more realistic number of the carbon emissions of what we're talking about.
Thank
even
you,
with
Wish.
existing
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to go on to the next
that's
one.
that's my thing from the last one, so go on. Sorry,
Thank
thanks.
you. Thank you so much. So Jessica Gregg, did you have a comment? Okay, not hearing from Jessica, I'll go on to Evan Rosenberg.
Hi, thank you. This is Evan Rosenberg with SREC Trade. I had a brief comment regarding approaches to metering and monitoring requirements for electricity consumption. I believe that an MED should consider including in the rules some flexible approaches to what sorts of metering requirements will be accepted in certain cases. So, for example, on-road EV charging, on-road non-residential EV charging, we're seeing a lot more, universalization in terms of the equipment used. So networked charging, smart charging should really be the requirement. It's easy to validate, it's easy to obtain and manage that kind of data. But in off-road vehicle applications, we're seeing a lot more of a dynamic space. So forklifts, cargo handling equipment, refrigeration units, charging equipment at the ports. It's less likely that these types of charging stations will be standardized. And so I think a more flexible approach to how data is collected should be considered, and really put the onus on the credit generator to demonstrate that they can collect and validate the data, and not require that the data necessarily be metered in the way that on-road equipment is metered. So, for example, telematics can be something that's considered for off-road equipment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just circling back to Jessica again, you had your hand up. I don't see Jessica Gregg anymore, but I see another Jessica. Are you the same person? Okay. Not seeing any hands in the room at this time, or Kara has raised her hand. Go ahead, Kara.
This should just be short. Thank you. So, and this comment is mostly for Alaric. It could be for the department. Credit generation is one of those areas where equity comes into play, and thinking about what is transportation electrification and the technologies that support it is really important, especially and considering the effect that those technologies or increased transportation electrification can have on disadvantaged communities is broad, and so TE can be quite inclusive. I want us to be open-minded about what that could look like for credit generators.
Thank you, Kara. So I'm going to move us along. We have our next presentation from Sam Wade about renewable natural gas. And Sam, as everyone else, if you could keep your presentation 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll have one prompt afterwards.
Absolutely, happy to do that. Great to be with everybody. Sam Wade with the Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas. We're a national trade association that works on renewable natural gas issues across the country. We have over 400 members across the supply chain and represent 98% of the pipeline interconnected RNG supply in North America. The primary reason to look at RNG seriously in programs like this is the massive methane reduction benefits that RNG projects produce. We capture methane from existing organic waste sources, including food waste, animal manure, and wastewater sludge, and we redirect it away from the environment and provide a clean fuel as a result. These concepts have been supported by US EPA and other agencies for over 25 years through the AgStar program and the LMOP, landfill methane program, and it's a proven clean energy technology that works well. So one of the things I wanted to get into the details of briefly here is the carbon intensity scoring for renewable natural gas projects, because it can at times be complex and controversial, but essentially this figure is from Argonne National Labs, the creator of the GREET model, and it shows, starting from the left here, the carbon intensities for diesel and fossil natural gas, both relatively high, approaching 100 as we heard earlier today. And then switching past electricity and renewable diesel, here we begin to get into the RNG pathways. Landfill gas pathways are traditionally slightly carbon positive, although they can be close to carbon neutral when renewable electricity is used as the primary energy input. RNG pathways associated with livestock manure, wastewater sludge, and food waste can all be carbon negative, which means they can actually produce more emission reductions per unit of energy than they emit. So getting into those details and correctly scoring those types of pathways in New Mexico will especially be important. Obviously, there's a big dairy industry here in the state, and it has different handling practices than other places like California. So we're going to have to spend some time talking about those topics. But there's a lot of potential here and a lot of good greenhouse gas benefits that can be achieved through these pathways. We wanted to give some sense of the potential in the state. And so what I did was I pulled the estimates of potential for each type of feedstock from a study that was conducted by the consulting firm ICF for the American Gas Foundation in 2019. And this table shows for within the state of New Mexico, the potential, sort of in a commercial potential estimate, would be what we'd recommend. Sort of the high commercial potential estimate is the numbers that we tend to utilize, is very significant from all these sources, but animal manure is a big one. RNG from just the anaerobic digestion sources shown in this table could potentially supply 58 times the current natural gas vehicle demand in New Mexico. So we think there's a lot that could be done. Obviously, natural gas vehicle demand could grow, and RNG supply would have to grow significantly as well. We also would like, ideally, this program to think about RNG into many other end-use applications as well, including hydrogen, potentially for power production, or even renewable natural gas to liquids as an emerging technology, or at a minimum as a process energy input to making liquid biofuels as well. So another data point around that is that our high estimate, just from the anaerobic digestion feedstocks, could potentially supply 14% of all gas currently delivered to New Mexico customers. So we want to be thought of as the Swiss Army knife of fuels here, and as an input to making other fuels. And we want to remind everybody about the strong methane story associated with these feedstocks. So those are the key points I wanted to convey. And I think earlier you asked what was the amount of natural gas vehicle use in the state currently. I do think we can provide that to you from US EIA data here. There's a link in the bottom, should should be able to get you that. So I'll pause there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sam. So we have a prompt for this presentation. In addition, Jessica, Greg, you had your hand raised earlier. I see that you've rejoined the meeting, so I'll give you an opportunity to speak first after I give the prompt, and then Wish, you are second. So the prompt is, what are the market opportunities for renewable natural gas in New Mexico? Jessica?
I apologize. I keep getting kicked off Wi-Fi, so my hand is just up accidentally.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go on to you, Wish.
Sam, that was fantastic. Thank you very, very much. If the committee doesn't realize this, RNG, bio-natural gas is the only way to go negative in carbon. It's a very big deal. So you can essentially make a lot of fuels negative, not just lower the carbon intensity, which helps you get your emissions better. So market opportunities is a very important question because, like I said earlier, instead of just EVs, we need to have our RNG, NG vehicles also in the state. So any opportunity to enhance that allows for biogas to be introduced into transportation. So especially large buses, diesel-related vehicles or diesel-related applications. That's where I would, so anything, just like we're doing it for electric vehicles, you need to do it for another pathway for natural gas. So anyway, that was my comment.
Thank you so much. We do have time for additional comments if anyone has comments on this section. I see Gabe, you have raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate all that we're learning as part of this committee. I do think that it's important to look closely at potential issues with induced demand when it comes to clearing avoided methane from the dairy segment. Obviously, that's been a really controversial aspect of California's program, and so just encourage NED to look closely at that. Thank you.
Can I respond to that quickly?
Yes.
Yeah, that has come up in California, but I think that if you look at the actual academics who've studied that issue, they haven't found any perverse incentives at this time. We don't want to encourage folks to change their manure handling practices. We simply want to go to the places that currently use significant liquid handling and have high methane emissions and capture that methane and turn it into a useful fuel.
Thank you. And we have time for one more comment if anyone has additional comments. Yes.
Just quickly, I think it's a tremendous opportunity for biofuels in New Mexico because of some of the other incentives that we have here that are like-kind, transferable, and stackable, being used in Clovis, New Mexico, being used in Roswell, the biomass tax credit, very effective and incentivizing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to a presentation from Michael Teague about biodiesel.
Pass it down this way.
Yeah, we can do that.
We see the slide.
I think Mike's just going to pull up one slide. I don't have a presentation. I do appreciate the opportunity to present because I love the conversation around markets and Mike's big question, big red question at the end of your slide. But as I sit here and think about this, if you're only focused on the credits for different pieces of your fuel stream and you haven't figured out how to get all those different pieces of the fuel stream into your state to a consumer, then you might have an incentive program that's not doing anything. And I think that's my broader concern. So I am from One Oak. We're a pipeline company out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. We cover about 22 different states. We move natural gas, gas liquids, refined products, and crude. If you move a piece of energy through a pipe, we can do it. And if we do it in the middle of the country instead of being in California or New York, I'm happy with that. On the refined product side, we handle a lot of the different products that we've been talking about. Renewable diesel, biodiesel, ethanol blending for gasoline. As we move things through pipe to New Mexico specifically, One Oak has pipes that come into New Mexico. We don't own any of the terminals at the end of those pipes. And I'll back up a little bit and explain why that's important. Originally, Colt had asked me to talk about biodiesel, and so I'm going to take a little bit of liberty and go way beyond that. But I will start with biodiesel. And so when you're talking about moving things through, transporting energy sources, and you want to keep your emissions down, the pipeline guy says you put it in a pipe, and you move it along the pipe as far as you can before you have to put it into a truck to carry it, or rail to carry it the rest of the way. Guess what you don't move through a pipe? Biodiesel and ethanol and the feedstocks to create biodiesel, right? So we can move a lot of things through a pipe. Those aren't some of them. So when it comes to biodiesel, and you're talking about ethanol and other feedstocks and not going to do it by pipe, what that means, and Eduardo, this gets a little bit to the implementation timeline, if you're going to require terminals in New Mexico that don't currently have biodiesel, right, to have that product, they're going to need separate storage tanks, right? You're going to have to talk about moving those feedstocks into the state by truck or rail, right? Some of that already happens. The railways already do some of that. But when it comes to road transportation, for the most part, all of that stuff is moving across by trucks. Stored in separate tanks and then blended at the truck terminals. We are leaning into some of this, and so we actually have a project right now. We're building another 30,000 barrel ethanol tank in El Paso at our terminal there. And you can imagine where those trucks go. There's also some issues with it. And so specific to biodiesel, again, we're in 22 different states, so we get to take lessons learned from around that portion. Minnesota has a requirement for biodiesel, and almost every single winter when it gets cold and the biodiesel gums up the nozzles at the truck terminals, we immediately go back to the state and we say, hey, we need a waiver. So I think you need to build some of that in. I thought the presentation last week from Taos was really interesting around RD and the cloud point and what may work or may not work for them. Building those flexibilities into a rulemaking is going to be really important to make sure you've got something you can actually implement. I also think about New Mexico, and it has the biodiesel mandate, and it's been just suspended kind of year after year. So again, if you're creating a system trying to incentivize change, you need to take into account all of those things and the lessons learned, not just, I love the conversation on the credit market of Washington, Oregon, and California, but when you're talking about moving product to use those credits, there's other states that I think you can take a look around, and if we can be helpful with that, let us know. Renewable diesel, and I think Carrie Ann's going to talk about this more, and I'm glad that she is because she's a much better expert than I am. We are right now, you can move renewable diesel through a pipe, but you have to make some changes. And so we've got a line right now going from Houston up to Frost, Texas, where we will change out all of the soft goods inside that pipeline. So seals, everything in the valves, to be able to move that because of the non-aromatics. But we're making that change to move renewable diesel up to Frost. I won't call it a pilot project because it's more than that, but if that is something where there was a commercially viable project to move renewable diesel into the state of New Mexico, that probably is more than just incentives on a clean transportation fuel system. But if that was a commercially viable project, I think one would be very interested in it. But if it's not commercially viable, we're not going to build a pipe if nobody's going to use it, right? If that makes sense. Also appreciate the comments on RNG. Different role. I used to be in Oklahoma, and so I was in charge of the CNG program for the state, which was interesting. On the RNG side, we've got some experience primarily in Wisconsin with dairy and in Oklahoma around landfills to pull that gas in. But I think it went back to the conversation before. That gas is not tracked from a transportation use. It goes into a big transmission pipe for us. In Oklahoma, for the Wisconsin as well. Most of those two pieces, they feed into our gas transmission lines and they're going to a power plant. Right? So just a lot of different products that we touch, a lot of different experiences from around a lot of different states. I do appreciate the comment about credit markets, but if you're incentivizing something that you're not going to have in the state, then I don't think you're getting what you really want. So, thanks.
Thank you so much. And we have a few minutes for questions or comments, if anyone has questions or comments.
I would just say with respect to pipeline blending of renewable natural gas, it's a key advantage of the fuel is that it's completely fungible with the fossil gas system, but it also creates accounting challenges, and they've been solved in the other programs through a system called book and claim. We just strongly encourage you to take that same approach.
Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Book and claim is a huge piece. That really hasn't been a conversation in here. But again, back to transportation fuels. Our system across 22 states is a fungible system. These guys will all recognize the advantage of that. What that means is you put something in Houston and you get to take it out in Albuquerque, right? It also means that we optimize the entire system, which keeps costs down, and those costs will all end up at consumers. So Sam, I agree with that, right? That's the advantage not only for RNG, but on the diesel side, that's the advantage of renewable diesel versus biodiesel.
Thank you. I'm going to go with Jed online first and then Brian. Jed Smith, are you there? Maybe we'll come back to Jed a little later. Go ahead, Brian.
Sure, just a couple of quick comments following on the logistics side of things. And Mike's absolutely right in terms of logistics and build out. And one of the challenges that I think we're going to see as industry looks to try and participate in the marketplace is the infrastructure that needs to be built at terminals. And so those things take time, everything from permitting to actual construction. We're going to have to build that into how we can achieve the goals that are being asked for by the state. That's been one of the big challenges when we look at the biodiesel mandate and have looked at it since 2010. 2011, is that there is a lack of physical infrastructure, not to mention that ways to physically build those lines out are challenging. And so something just to be cognizant of in terms of how we build out the physical timelines for the projects and the incremental costs. So, to build out a terminal and put in tankage, pipelines, rail offloading, and so forth are significant expenses that require long-term permitting for those items as well as construction time, and not to mention incremental expense on.
Thank you so much. And I'll try you one more time. Jed Smith, did you have a question or comment? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Eduardo.
Yeah, just a quick comment and I guess question to the presenters here. So we talk about capacity credits before for electricity and hydrogen, right? And as I mentioned, I wouldn't suggest the agency to consider capacity credits because it's not a measurable carbon intensity. But if the agency were to consider, I think the question will be, Michael and others, like RNG, biodiesel, there's also capacity infrastructure needs that need to be incentivized over there, right? So if we talk about a technology neutral program, it shouldn't be just focused on electricity or hydrogen, for example, but you have also biodiesel and the other pathways as well as that need. So I guess, can you clarify a little bit more about the infrastructure pieces?
So for me, and I go back to what Brian just talked about too with additional tanks, I don't know that I would consider those to be part of a carbon intensity market system. And I agree with you on the capacity building on the electricity side. I don't think that a little bit of apples and oranges, right? And so if we're talking about a tax credit market, then you got to get all the right oranges in the right bucket. And I don't think those fit. Now they may fit in that last section Travis had on his slide of additional projects. I think they also fit maybe in some other programs. So the ethanol tank we're building in El Paso right now is actually with part of a grant from the USDA. Right? There are other programs and other systems that could incentivize those types of projects and help you keep just the oranges all lined up over here.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to move us along now. Our last presenter is Corianne Wind, and she will be talking about renewable diesel. She's joining us online.
Morning, everyone. So Corianne Wind here representing Clean Fuels Alliance Americas. I'm Director of State Regulatory Affairs. As you heard from me last week, previously established and ran the Oregon Clean Fuels Program, but I've transitioned over to the Clean Fuels Alliance in 2024. So the Clean Fuels Alliance, for everyone, represents the biodiesel, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation industry, all the way from the farmers to the producers, as well as the end users and the fleets. So next slide. And I think what I really kind of like wanted to start off with here is kind of like picking up on some of the previous conversations. I've been kind of patient and not raising my hand all the time, but I'll try and pepper in some comments from previous issues that were raised. Is that the reason why we're doing clean transportation fuel standard in New Mexico? It is a push and a pull, right? If we just let history dictate like what the future is going to be, of course you're going to have the status quo. And what we're looking for in New Mexico is a change. So it really is about how the clean transportation fuel standard can actually affect that change. And so it's super helpful to see what the current state of logistics are, the current state of infrastructure are. We know that we're going to need more to expand that footprint. And for the Clean Fuels Alliance, since we're focused on the heavy duty, the diesel applications, side of transportation, there's a lot of opportunity here, and some that do require new logistics and new infrastructure, and some that don't. So New Mexico for us represents about a 700 million gallon diesel consumption, and so we can approach that for different kinds of ways. I mean, biodiesel is a fuel that is produced in billion gallon quantities right now, at about a 20% blend rate, which is kind of a standard way of looking about what that biodiesel demand is. That's about 140 million gallons of biodiesel. The industry produces way more than that. And if you're looking at renewable diesel, that's 100% drop in fuel. So is there 700 million gallons of renewable diesel currently being produced that can fill that market? Absolutely. I think that's where the question about infrastructure and logistics comes in. Next slide. So I tried to just the key factors for what I think about in New Mexico as the development of the CTFS is being considered. So one, there is in-state production of biodiesel renewable diesel in the state of New Mexico, and I think it's really important to keep in mind what that capacity is, where those gallons are, and how it's used, and really incentivized to be kept in the state of New Mexico. So as the previous presenter also talked about, previous presenters, multiple of them, the key geographic feature about New Mexico is that it is connected in different ways than the West Coast states are to the different producers and to the end users of these fuels. The location, between the Gulf states that are heavy producers and then West Coast with the heavy, consumers. I mean, it is really ideal that New Mexico sits in between that and can serve as a good magnet, as a good, additional market for producers in the Gulf states and the Midwest to be able to pull product into New Mexico. Initially starting off in Oregon and in Washington, even for that matter, to get fuels from the Midwest to the West Coast was a really just hard logistics to figure out. But what I can say about that is that because of the market signal that those states have sent to the producers, the logistics for that have been figured out, and I have no doubt that that will be the same case in New Mexico as well. I think another thing that's really key for us, for the biodiesel, renewable diesel market, is how NEBD considers diesel use. I know a lot of times we focus on-road uses in the trucks, but I think we should also really take to consideration off-road uses. The biodiesel, renewable diesel producers, the way that we are focusing strategically on the future of our fuels is in those hard to electrify spaces. So as the technology, as electrification transitions, it'll be much easier to do so on the light duty side and harder to do so on the heavy duty side. And that is the places where we're really focusing on making sure that the BD and the RD can fulfill those needs. So if you're talking about things, especially like marine uses and aviation with our sustainable aviation fuel, rail uses, and other kinds of off-road applications, I think that is key to consider. And I would say consider in air quotes consider. You can consider that in a lot of different ways. It's not only in credit generation, but if you're going to consider it in credit generation, which I do advocate for, it's you have to be able to consider those huge potential of credit generations in how the targets for the carbon reductions are also established. So they do go hand in hand. You can't just create credits and then have low standards, because then you're going to flood the market with credits, right? And you want robust credit prices to incent the future investments. So there needs to be a balance between those two things. I would point out that a couple of very key new members to the Clean Fuels Alliance are railroads. So Class 1 railroads, specifically UP and BNSF and the West Coast, are new members to us and have commitments for both their Scope 1, their footprint fuel use, so the increased use of bodies of renewable diesel in the locomotive engines, but also a very key partner in Scope 3 emissions, so helping their customers lower the footprint of transporting goods and commodities in their system, and to lower the carbon intensities of that, and being really good partners with our ag communities to provide logistics for feedstocks to the producers, as well as for those biofuels products to get to these new markets. So it's really key partners in making that all happen. And then this last bullet point here, I mean, I state as indirect land use change for the crop-based biofuels, but it has been touched upon in other presenters as well, whether it's caps on lipids, or whether it's trying to prevent unintended consequences with negative externalities, land use change, deforestation. I think I just want to be really, there's 2 points that I want to make here. One is that there is new science and new data, and as you heard me speak last week about it too, always the LCFS, the CTFS here is based largely upon just really good data and really good metrics about how you measure that, and really urge you to consider using the best data and the best information for how you quantify those effects. The other thing that I want to remind everyone too is just as I think what has really become apparent in an ILUC discussion is there is an assertion of a problem that frankly I haven't seen quantification of that problem actually exists. So, if you have a problem that is identified, then we go find a solution to the problem. But I think a lot of the topic of conversation about deforestation, for example, is rhetorical and not presented in a way that there is an identified problem that needs to be fixed. And I would say that something like a cap on feedstock is a very, very drastic reaction to that issue. I think there's a lot of different ways that you can address and help mitigate and provide safeguards to those kinds of concerns. But the reactions or the proposed solutions that have been coming up, mainly in California, are, in our industry's perspective, just very drastic, very draconian, and again, will have really bad unintended consequences of those proposed solutions as well. So just something to keep in mind.
Thank you so much, Corianne. We do have a prompt for your presentation, which I'll share now. What are the market opportunities for biodiesel and renewable diesel in New Mexico? I'll try calling on Jed again. Jed, are you back? No, I think he's either his audio's not working or he's perhaps away from his computer. And I'm not seeing anyone else online. Anybody in the room care to comment on that prompt? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the opportunities can be seen in other markets. And the expansion of biodiesel to, as you referred to it, as a blend wall, 20%. New Mexico's been at about 2% for the existence of the B5 mandate that hasn't been implemented. So there's expansion for growth there. Likewise for the expansion of renewable diesel. If you look at the California market, granted, it's a different economy and different scale and different access to those products. It's approximately 60% of the diesel sold in California is a combination of that biodiesel and renewable diesel. So there is an opportunity for expansion of those products within that drop in to vehicles and uses that exist in use today. And I'll also, to kind of expand on Corian's point about the other applications that they could be used in, I think sooner rather than later, New Mexico should identify what constitutes a transportation fuel and what fuels can be able to opt into that program. With the logical, first things to consider as being SAF, which would not be obligated as transportation fuels, not obligated in other markets, as well as those rail applications that could generate credits, but as well as agricultural uses, it should not be typically viewed as on-road applications or on-road transportation applications.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for this topic? Yes.
Actually, can I respond real quickly?
Sure, go ahead.
So, yeah, I just want to point out, again, kind of going back to the Oregon program, Oregon market is much more similar to the New Mexico market. And, the blend rate for the biodiesel and renewable diesel, even in Oregon, is in the 35% range. So it's not 60, but it is definitely higher. And in Oregon, similar to New Mexico as well, benefits from a companion renewable fuel standard that mandated a certain percentage of biodiesel. So I would say that there is that infrastructure in the market that had been built out to some extent with biodiesel that has been greatly expanded, with a clean fuels program. Going back to the data that Michael Ford presented too, I think that is the reason why in Oregon there is a higher percentage of biodiesel credits compared to the other states, because even California, when they started LCFS, started with zero, basically, mandate for biodiesel. So there are definitely opportunities for different market drivers to kind of work hand in hand to do that. And again, going back to the conversation about not having any in-state refining in Oregon as well, same thing. There is no refining in-state, everything is imported. So we get, Oregon gets fuels from pipeline, from barges, from tanker ships, from rail cars, from trucks. There is a lot of fuel that moves between Oregon and Washington, not necessarily California, because like you said, California has kind of captured, a market as far as finished product. But there is a lot of fuel that goes back and forth between Oregon and Washington. And so the ability to track the rail, to track the trucks especially, is something that that is prevalent in those two programs.
Thank you so much, Corianne. And then you want to make a comment, Travis?
Yeah, Travis Madsen from SWEEP with a question, I guess, for Corianne. I guess I'm thinking about the overlap between the New Mexico Clean Fuel Standard and the federal Renewable Fuel Standard, and it seems to me like there's maybe a potential for double counting emissions reductions there. I wonder if that's a problem you've thought about, Corianne, or if you have any thoughts about what might be done to mitigate that concern.
Yeah, I don't see it as an overlap. I think, again, they're very complementary policies. They affect a lot of the same kind of fuels. If you're looking at it from a producer or regulatory perspective, yes, there's opportunity to generate RINs as well as LCFS or, clean fuels credits in those markets. I don't consider it double counting as far as emissions, because it's like it's compliance with separate regulatory requirements as well. So it's the fuel providers. The point of regulation for RFS is different. In some cases, it's the same in some cases, but from the state CTFS requirements. So.
Could I speak to that a little bit too? Because I think almost all the fuels we've talked about today have federal incentives that you do need to stack together with state level incentives to get greater total penetration. So every time a new state level program is added to the existing federal stack, you will see incremental supply, and that's true for EVs and hydrogen, as well as for liquid fuels and the gaseous fuels.
Thank you so much. Okay, one more quick one on this.
Travis, just from a program-specific differentiation, the RFS is more of what I would refer to as like a fuels blend mandate, to where you're looking at specific targets of given fuels in a given category, and thus the nesting program under the RFS. Well, it does have a minimum greenhouse gas emissions reduction threshold to cross. Once you've crossed it, there's increment to, if you look at the way that BioRNG works, it's significantly below those levels. Secondarily, when you look at a state-level LCFS, those are declining greenhouse gas emissions targets. So they're very different programs in terms of what they're doing. And while the same fuels qualify under each program, the target of the program is different, and the way that they're implemented and structured. So they're not really double counting as so much as they are as incentivizing fuels in different structures and methodologies.
Thank you. I'll take you next, but I want to say we have a little bit of extra time before we have to close, because the committee voted to go until 12:30. So you can continue on this topic, but I also want to open up the discussion broader topics. If there's something you wanted to say earlier and you didn't get a chance to, or a point you want to elaborate on, or any other related topic, this is a good time to do that. And we'll have this open discussion until 12:15. Please go ahead, Eduardo.
Yeah, I just want to remind again the advisory committee that the HB 41 bill has some provisions that treat those elements. In particular, provision C6 says that allow market participants to generate credits under any overlapping current and future federal transportation fuel regulations. So the RFS and all these other elements can be accounted, as well as the New Mexico LCFS credits.
Thank you. It's Corianne, go right ahead. Oh, she put her hand down.
I mean myself. Okay, well, since there is a little bit of time, I'll go back and respond to some of the previous questions. So I know there was conversation about carbon sequestration and pathway applications, and there is a pathway that was approved in the state of Oregon for an ethanol refinery that has CCS. So if you're kind of looking at a way, just to, as a model, as something to look at, is how something like that would be incorporated in New Mexico. I mean, there is a model out there. It was with a state that has primacy over their injection control program, so it's not dependent on EPA. But you can just see kind of the rigor of the review and the requirements that Oregon has taken that was different than California. So I wanted to point that out. And I think there was another comment too about a pathway application, and I think Jed might have even made this comment before about if the robustness of the application makes the processing of it more efficient. And so I think that's something that is considered validation of the application, and it's a little technical, part of the verification program. But it is possible for the agency to require this pre-validation of the application that should provide extra assurance that the application is that robust. And that is something that they have in the California program, and Oregon is proposing to add that in their current rulemaking that's going on right now. That's all I have.
Thank you, Corianne. Any additional comments or questions? Oh, sorry, go right ahead.
I just wanted to revisit something that was raised in the last advisory committee meeting and kind of add to it a little bit. Eduardo brought up the slope of the carbon reduction curve. I think the sooner that there is visibility of that or consideration within the modeling of how that kicks off the program is exceedingly important. A program that overly, it initially starts with very aggressive reductions in order to try to hit the trajectory of 20% reductions by 2030 without a clear view on ability to generate credits, and having those mechanisms in place should be very transparent. And an aspect of that is really the function of the statutory requirement of the cost containment mechanisms and consideration of what price caps should be in place in order to protect the overall fuels market from rapid acceleration of fuel prices that consumers across New Mexico would be seeing.
If I could take a little bit of a counter view, though, I mean, what we've seen from all the existing programs is that was a primary consideration during the program design, and you're now seeing relatively low credit prices as a result of potentially over-conservative target setting. So I don't think in a small state like New Mexico we have to be overly concerned with that if we can design enough flexibility to ensure that compliance options are there for all the fuels.
Brian?
So I think to build on both of those comments, it's going to be the combination of what the cost containment program looks like and then how the guardrails that are implicit in the statute are handled, right? So I think one of the concerns that any investor would have who is looking at either building infrastructure in the state or putting on a new project that would then send fuels to the state, whether it's an RNG project or whether it's an ethanol plant or a renewable diesel plant that needs to then invest in those infrastructure supply chains, knowing and understanding what are the off-ramps and how specifically the state would implement those types of items, because those are the risks, right? That's something that doesn't exist in some of these other programs. Effectively, you have price caps that have been built in, but you do not have guardrails that are specifically things that allow for a deferral of the program. And so deferrals of programs and understanding what the drivers will be are going to be key for parties to look at how do we comply with the program. And you've got to understand those rules up front, because if they're not understood or they change in the back end, you end up with effectively investor instability and lack of supply into the marketplace. And we see that with some of the rules that are starting to change in California as they're backing out credit generating pathways.
Yeah, we certainly don't like the response to oversupply being let's take away some of the options, right? It's better to keep all the options on the table and be, not aggressive, but ambitious in your goals, because climate change is not slowing down. It's the problem is getting worse, right?
Thank you. We have 3 folks online who've been waiting for a little while. Those will be our last comments for today. So Gabe, please go ahead.
Thanks again to everyone for all the presentations and conversations today. I just wanted to flag 2 issues from earlier in the conversation. The first was, I think a comment made, maybe it was by Jennifer, about the additional burden that we saw that California's subsurface regulations created in the credit pathways for the LCFS in California. And I think she pointed to the federal Class 6, EPA Class 6 permitting being sufficient. I just want to point out that that's under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and that's really intended to protect drinking water and not to ensure carbon sequestration or improvements in carbon intensity or greenhouse gas reduction. So I would really encourage NMED to consider, to the extent that CCS is considered as part of a crediting pathway, that a separate process is necessary focused on carbon mitigation. And the second comment I wanted to quickly respond to is that it's true that HB 41 includes express language that to allow overlapping crediting from other federal programs. But I did also just want to note that there's also express authority for NMED to stabilize and incentivize investment in the credit market within the CFS. And I think that authority does allow considering how different federal incentives may shape the market, and allows for some innovation as to how things move to make that it's a effective market. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabe. Next is Kara. Are you there, Kara?
She put her hand down.
She did, but She was.
I am here.
Did you have a comment or question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I forgot to hit unmute. So this comment goes all the way back to Mr. Ford's presentation. He had a slide where I think at the bottom there was a comment that New Mexico's CI will be lower than the CI in the other states. And I was just wondering, does that comment mean that New Mexico's CI may start lower than any of the other states started at, or just relative now to those other states?
Could I answer?
Sure.
It may start lower. It's the former of the two options you gave. It may start lower than, and it may, well, it's both, because those values given were also the latest values from those respective states, and it may be lower as well than those respective values. Obviously, there was ensuing discussion, so I gave two reasons as to why that might be. One is transportation distance would be shorter. Two is the crude slate might be lighter, higher API gravity number. Brian gave a reason for why it might not be the case. There's the offsetting factor of there might be relatively more trucking for some fuel to be transported into the state. So I don't want to get ahead of my skis there. It depends on how all of these factors balance out. But
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Can I follow up?
Yes, briefly.
Okay. Can you, so this obviously would have a tremendous effect on the overall market, and the slope at which New Mexico will increase, are you hoping that will start lower and that the curve will be steeper for greater CI over time, or are you just going to adjust that over time depending on how things are going?
Can I answer that too?
Very, very briefly.
The percentage reductions are defined in statute, so once we get the baseline, the rest is history.
Thank you. Okay, and our last
thanks.
Our last question or comment will be from Jed, if you're there. I think he's still not there. Or
he's unmuted himself, but
oh,
it's
yes?
not coming through.
Okay, we can't hear your audio, Jed, so sorry. So we're going to wrap up with the questions now. We are going to do one final roll call because some advisory committee members joined after the last roll call, but I think this will be pretty quick. And then after that, but first I want to say thank you to all the presenters. Those were wonderful.
Can you hear me?
Oh, is that Jed?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, if you have a question or comment, please go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. Some reason I was unmuted and it wasn't working, but due to the format of this meeting, can the advisory committee give detailed input before the final report is put out? Because I feel there's not enough time to really dig into the weeds on some of these issues, and we kind of skim over the top on a lot. How is that going to work?
I'm going to have ask Claudia Borchert, our Climate Change Bureau Chief, to answer that question.
Oops. No, it stays on. All right. Yeah, thank you for that. I've received that question from multiple people, and I think it's a very important one. And so while that's not what we are, what the direction is that we are going at this very moment, I am willing to entertain that question and take it back and rethink it and re-ask it. And because of the tight timeline of this entire report, what that would mean is if we rethink it, then you'll get an email about kind of new direction on taking taking advisory committee comments, and my thought would be that it would be we would summarize all the prompts that we had today, and then ask for specific input on those prompts, and then of course open it up for all of you to provide input in whatever else you want to, and actually include that as an appendix to the report. I am happy to reconsider that. I don't have an answer for you right now.
So thank you. another comment I had on the trucking of products for renewable diesel, biodiesel, moving product and fuels through the state. The state already is doing that as we speak. And the other states that have these programs also are doing that as well. So that's the difference between having a mandate and a program like that we are designing right now, that it will benefit the state in the long run and promote growth in New Mexico.
The process, and so the question is the hesitation for the advisory committee providing comments due to the open rules that we have? Because if that's the case, I know other states like California, for example, when they have these workshops, they enable everybody to put comments on those presentations, and that's a way also to provide that input in a timely fashion, so it also doesn't come at the end on the report, but we, the advisory committee, and also maybe the public, has the opportunity to comment on these presentations, and then that input can be taken into account for the final report.
Okay, so let me just understand. So you're saying that if not only the advisory committee, but anybody could provide comment on the content of the presentation thus far, that's what you're saying is the process that...
I think you worded it, if that's what the state needs to comply with the open meetings.
Correct. Right, yeah.
That is a way to do it.
And I think every state has their own Open Meetings Act, for sure. And I mean, I just want to remind people that we also, I mean, there's a very robust opportunity to provide comment on the rules going forward once those rules get petitioned and if the IB agrees to hear them. So it's really a two-part process. And so we are really looking for more technical input right now, and then more comments on the rules. There's a whole separate process for that. But let me do what I can. I will find out, and I will. I mean, so part of the problem, though, is if, for example, we're trying to open it up to the public will not have equal access to understand how they can provide their comments to the committee report process, because they won't find out about that until we notice. I don't know. I need to think about all these things.
So there'll be an update probably either by email or at the next meeting, correct?
And or by notice and by agenda notification. All the steps that go into one of these meetings happening.
I want to call for the roll call before it's too late. So could you please go ahead with that one?
Yes, thanks. I'll just call those names that I have not accounted for on the roll. Starting with Dalva Molenberg.
Present.
Thank you, Dalva. Daniel Klein. Okay, I'm marking Daniel absent. Evan Rosenberg.
I am here, present.
Thank you, Evan. Luis Reyes. Okay, Luis is absent. Robert Hogevort. Okay, I'm marking Robert as absent. Tom Dolmeyer. Okay, Tom, I'm marking as absent as well. That is all the names that we had not accounted for, so we're all set.
Sure. So just want to remind everyone about the plan for the next meeting is 2 weeks from today, Friday, July 12th, 9 o'clock, here in the same room. Virtual option will also be available. Please check the NMED calendar for the link on how to access the meeting virtually. And we will send you the agenda. The agenda will give notice 10 days in advance per the procedures you just adopted. We'll have the agenda ready 72 hours in advance, and you'll be able to get the presentations online. I believe that's it for the procedural matters for the next meeting.
Thank you. And I also want to say, for a couple minutes, please come up and speak with us. Would anyone on the advisory committee like to make a motion to adjourn? So moved. So moved.
I second.
second, okay. Did you get those?
Carl moved.
And seconded by
Sam Wade.
Sam
Sam.
Wade, seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hands. That's everyone in the room. We'll see, give you a minute to look online.
If you're online, please just raise your hand using the WebEx function.
Are you looking for his name?
Folks to vote for
Oh,
thank you. Stuff. That's what happened. Awesome. Sure, sir. Footnotes in my slides if you guys want to take a look. There's a link to the EIA data for each state.
Yeah.
It has transportation broken out as a use of natural gas.
Of gas. Yeah, I guess I missed the bus
No,
on
it's
that.
super easy. It's not very obvious, but we use that fairly frequently to see what's happening in each state. So yeah, should have seconds.
I feel like that same thing for electricity is in the EIA website somewhere.
Yeah, they have the.
Okay, we have 21 in favor.
They don't treat it with the
That's majority? Okay.
I may have, because I was referring to the SED
Opposed
dashboard
motion.
when I
Okay,
ran
wait,
into the
folks.
electricity
Sorry,
issue.
folks, he's still taking the vote.
Yes, it is. I don't know.
I was just counting the votes online. Thanks for your patience. Does anyone oppose the motion? Folks online, if you could lower your hands from the last vote. Evan Rosenberg, are you in opposition? Evan, are you there? Evan, if we could get a voice vote from you, otherwise I'm not going to count it. Thank you, Evan. Any abstentions? Motion passes.